Part 31. Everyone knows I'm a good man. Author, Tang Zhongmao. Chapter 301. Brother 9th, although you are raised by my wife, you are still a concubine. My wife has a son of her own, and you are not her biological child. How could she really treat you? After today's beating, you can finally see my wife's true face. A woman in gorgeous clothes was wiping her tears while speaking to Ji Chang's. You used to think that I was of low birth, and you avoided me and focused on getting close to your wife. But look, something really happened. My aunt is here to visit you. Ji Chang's leaned on the bedside and looked out the window. On the surface, he looked shocked, but he was actually checking his memory. This memory is also very clear and clear. The original owner was a concubine, and his father was only a fifth-rank official, but he had a very romantic temperament. He had countless concubines in the backyard, and there were a lot of concubines and concubines. The original owner ranked 9th, and he was raised in the house of the principal wife since he was a child. Inside. The reason why his romantic father was able to live such a cool life with only a fifth rank was because of his original grandfather, Marquis Zhongyang. The grandfather is a marquis, and the original owner's father, as the eldest son, will naturally inherit the title, even if he fails to live up to his expectations. This gives the other party the confidence to have fun. Similarly, although the original owner was a concubine, he still had enough confidence to act casually in such a big mansion. The reason is naturally not how much he is favored by his father, but the wife who raised him. The original owner's biological mother was the wife's dowry girl. She had always been loyal to the head of the house. Even after being taken in and given the title, the relationship between the master and the servant remained the same. When the original owner was 5 years old, the wife's legitimate son fell into the water. It was the original owner's biological mother who ignored the danger. Rescued the other party. After the biological mother passed away not long after, the wife took the original owner to her yard to take care of him, and all the treatment was as that of the legitimate young master. The original owner was raised by a noble family, but he had a naughty temperament since he was a child. When he was a child, he was just naughty. When he grew up, he directly became a playboy. He spent his days entertaining cats and dogs, walking birds, and shopping. When he was a child, his wife loved him because he lost his biological mother and was reluctant to punish him harshly. When he was a teenager, she discovered that the child seemed to be growing crookedly, so she stopped caring and hurriedly began to discipline him. But after all, the child is not his biological child. If he disciplines his biological child, he will not hold any grudge against his mother. However, there is a gap in the heart of the original owner who is not his biological child. Especially the eldest brother in front of him was regarded as the darling of his aunt and was not even scolded, while he, the bastard who was adopted and raised, was punished. It stands to reason that as a concubine, he was raised as a legitimate son, and he was given a lot more honor than other concubine brothers since he was a child. Not to mention that others also gave him a bit of face when he was away from home. The original owner should be grateful to his legitimate mother. However, he didn't think so. Instead of feeling grateful for his aunt's love, he wanted more. When his eldest brother was born weak and sick, the original owner had a sweet dream that his eldest brother would be happy soon, and that his aunt would remember him as his legitimate son if she lost her biological son. It's just that while he wanted to be the legitimate son of the Ho family, he didn't work hard, so he did a lot of bad things since he was a child. When he was a child, he could still say that children are naughty and ignorant, or that without his biological mother, he would inevitably have a somewhat aloof temper. When they grow up, these will naturally appear gradually. Even though his wife chased after him and tried to discipline him, he couldn't control her. On the contrary, because of her discipline, the original owner felt more and more that his wife just didn't regard him as his biological child. If he was his biological child, he would definitely not be able to do anything to her. Is it the child who was raised from a young age, or is the child of the girl who married him? No matter how strict the wife is on the face, she will not be too harsh because she is afraid of breaking the child. But today, the reason why she was beaten so harshly is because the original owner did something. Big mistake. His wife was usually relaxed towards him, but she was always very strict about his homework and conduct. The original owner did well in his homework, but his mind was not on it and he was very impetuous. The wife's character was related to women's sex. The wife herself had suffered from her husband, and she was very strict with her 2 sons in her yard. At least she couldn't let them start eating meat in their teens and then start a whole yard. But the original owner may have inherited his father's lust and thought about doing these messy things all day long, but his wife was very strict about it, so he could only talk about it and dare not take any practical actions. As a result, a few days ago, the original owner failed to control himself, and when he went out drunk, he molested the daughter of a young official. Teasing her in the street and forcing others to joke with her is just a joke for the man, but for the woman, she will be ridiculed, and no one will even dare to come to her door to ask for marriage. When the wife heard about this, she scolded the original owner for ruining the reputation of an innocent woman. The original owner was unrepentant and refused to admit his mistakes. The wife took the bat herself and beat him 20 times. The original owner had been pampered since he was a child. He had never suffered like this before. He was beaten so hard that he cried for his father and mother after being beaten for more than 2 months. He was sick in bed for more than 2 months. Before he left the room, he learned that his wife came to the door in person and took that person away. The woman was determined to be his wife. This was no less than a bolt from the blue for the original owner. After all, he always thought that he had good knowledge and good looks. He was also the young master of the Ho family. In the future, he would be able to marry the daughter of a second-rank official. He liked the woman's beauty, but if she had no family background, it would be better to be a concubine. Although she is a daughter of an official, since her reputation has been ruined by his teasing in the street, she will marry even if she doesn't want to. The original owner had a good idea, and planned to wait until he recovered from his illness to take a concubine in. However, when he came in, it was not his concubine but his wife. It was strange that he was willing to do so. From then on, he laid the foundation for his disaster, facing the one who loved and raised him. The ant's mother holds a grudge. Later, when he found an opportunity, he changed the medicine used to treat his frail elder brother, who died. His wife also fell seriously ill due to excessive grief and was about to die. Before his death, he left all the money in his warehouse to this person. The bastard. It's just that the original owner was so incompetent that he thought he had become the final winner in the Ho mansion. Little did he know that without the care of his wife and eldest brother, he was just a dish in the eyes of others. Not long after, he was driven out of the Ho mansion, sold his wife to pay off gambling debts, and finally died of illness in an alley. The life of the original owner can be said to be a journey of constant seeking death. When he was raised by his wife as a child, he could be said to have jumped from a concubine to the distinguished status of a legitimate son. And this lady was also sincerely good to him. Not only did she raise him well, but she also always tried to intervene in his discipline and wanted to cultivate him into a gentleman. She even specially invited him to help him learn well. A great scholar came to teach. As a result, the original owner not only failed to recognize good people, but also bit Lu Dongbin. He killed the person who had been protecting him, and in the end he was gone, completely desolate. The current timeline is that the original owner had just been exposed. His wife, who had always been very tolerant of him, was furious. Apparently this incident had touched her bottom line. She beat the original owner and locked him in a room. No one was allowed to visit. The woman sitting in front of him now, dressed in gorgeous clothes, had sneaked in. Her identity was also very difficult to explain. She was the biological sister of the original owner's biological mother. The original owner's biological mother was poor and sold her. Later, the original owner's biological mother became his wife's dowry girl and worked hard to protect the owner all the way until she died unfortunately. The wife specially gave money to her family, hoping that they could live a good life. As a result, this sister actually sold herself to the home mansion when the family had money, and finally became a flower in the yard of the original owner's father because of her good looks. But the dream of wealth she held might be a little too beautiful. After all, although the original owner's father liked beautiful flowers, he didn't like having only one flower. The entire backyard was filled with his concubines. The original owner's aunt was from an undistinguished family, her appearance could only be said to be good-looking, her temperament was not that good, and she could not play chess, calligraphy, or painting. The original owner's father favored her for a while and then forgot about her. Under such circumstances, the aunt who went to the backyard and tried her best to become a favored aunt naturally set her sights on the child born to her sister. He kept instigating and trying to get the original owner to be of the same mind as him. It's just that he is also stupid. He never thought that the original owner's backers were his wife and the eldest young master. If these two people really got into trouble with the original owner, how powerful a bastard could be in this backyard. Ji Chang's figured out the current situation and looked around. The whole room smells like medicine. Just from the smell, I knew that these medicines were expensive. The lady really loved the original owner as her own son, but who would have thought that she would raise a white-eyed wolf? The aunt was still chattering all kinds of things. Ji Chang's listened and suddenly coughed, "Auntie is wrong. My wife loves me, so she won't treat me like this." Brother Ninth, you are confused. My wife has her own biological son. How can she love you? Cough 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 cough. Ji Chang's glanced at the boy standing guard outside the window and coughed loudly, his voice full of stubbornness, "No. My wife loves me the most. He will not ignore me." The aunt wanted to say more, but she saw the young master on the bed coughing louder and louder, as if he wanted to cough out his lungs. The young man outside heard something was wrong and hurriedly opened the door and came in. As soon as he came in, Ji Chang's was shaken and clutching his chest. Pointing at the 15th aunt, she looked like she wanted to say something. You are talking nonsense. You." Before he finished speaking, he couldn't take a breath, tilted his head and fainted. The boy was startled and shouted, "Come here quickly." The young master fainted from anger. Lily is free and the fastest update, no anti-theft, no anti-theft. Everyone knows I'm a good man. Author, Tang Zhongmao. Chapter 302. Ji Chang's was very good at pretending to be fainted, especially for this group of people who were already weak. Not long after the boy called for someone in panic, an old doctor hurriedly came carrying a medicine box. It seemed that this doctor was raised in the Ji family, but in the memory of the original owner, no doctor had been left here before. Apparently, the wife beat the son who was raised under her knees, and was worried that something would happen to him, so she specially found a doctor to live with him. Waiting anytime and anywhere in the house. Not long after the doctor arrived, the curtain was opened again and the wife came. MRSG is not considered a beauty. She can only be described as delicate based on her face. However, her whole body is elegant and her every move carries the elegance that she has been taught since she was a child. She is the favorite mistress of the big family at the moment. As soon as she came in and saw Ji Chang's, who was sleeping on the bed with his teeth clenched and his eyes closed, MRSG's eyes flashed with worry. She only asked the doctor, "Doctor how is brother Ninth? Why did he suddenly fainted when he was fine?" Doctor he stroked his beard and said, "It's a symptom of anger attacking the heart. The 9th young master in the mansion is already suffering from a fever. He should take good care of him. If he doesn't want his condition to relapse, he should be careful in the future. What this means is that Ji Chang's himself is a patient and needs to be taken good care of. However, he is still angry at this time, which shows that the patient's healthcare environment is not very good. MRSG understood, and anger rose in her heart. When she first got married, she failed to take control of the housekeeper, and she also experienced a lot of being looked down upon by the servants of the Ho family. This time she beat Brother Ju, because she was afraid that the servants would mistakenly think that Brother Ju was lost in front of her favor. The wife specially beat up the people in his house and asked them to take good care of him. The kitchen even told them to cook soup to replenish Brother Ju's body for 12 hours, even though she had given birth to this child. I was angry, but I still felt sorry for him and felt relieved when his message was conveyed. As a result, ninth brother was just in bed for a few days. He was fine, but he couldn't go out. She also told him not to let others come to visit, but today he was so angry that he fainted. This child has been out-tempered since he was a child. He always wants to shout out loudly if he feels unhappy in his heart. How much grievance must he have to suffer if he can be forced to get angry and get rid of him? The wife immediately recalled the painful past of being downtrodden and downgraded by some people in the house. When she looked at the servants in the house who lowered their heads fearfully and did not dare to look at her, the coldness in her eyes almost overflowed. As long as the outsiders were still there, she held back for the moment, gave the doctor some money and sent the doctor off in a good mood. After waiting for the doctor to leave, she lowered her face and turned to look at the servants waiting in the room. Didn't I tell you to take good care of ninth brother? Yesterday, everything was fine, but today it's like this. Are you considering me as a wife who is useless? Knowing that my wife is usually lenient, but she has never been concerned about the matter of the eldest young master and the ninth young master, the boy who was the first to open the door quickly knelt on the ground with a pop and hurriedly threw the blame away. My wife is aware of it. How can we not be careless in serving Brother Ju? Today, if my aunt came to visit Brother Ju, I don't know what she said. Brother Ju asked us to go out and guard him while he followed us in the house. As my aunt was talking, I waited until I heard something was wrong inside, and when I pushed the door in, Brother Ju had already fainted. Anyway, even if someone is really angry with Master Ninth, it must be Aunt Ru who did it and has nothing to do with them. Like Aunt? MRSG didn't have a good impression of the aunt she sent to her door, but because she was the sister of Brother Ju's biological mother, she usually took care of her. Ninth brother's biological mother died young when he was young. The master of the house is also a love-minded person. Most of his thoughts are on all kinds of beauties. He treats ninth brother like any kitten or puppy. He teases him whenever he thinks of it. Put it aside if you can't think of it. She thought that this child had no biological mother, and it would be good to have a biological aunt to be close to him, so she did not stop Aunt Ru from wanting to get close to Brother Ju after entering the house. What did Aunt Ru say to this child? In MRSG's eyes, the child she brought up was a fun-loving and cheerful child, so he shouldn't have to hold his breath in so hard that he became extremely angry. Since she was Jugir's biological aunt, MRSG still had to worry about the child's face until she found out the truth. She put aside her displeasure for the time being and sat by the bed to take care of Ji Chang's. After Ji Chang's took the time to wake up, half an hour had passed, but MRSG never left, helping him wipe his hot forehead from time to time. As he was wiping, he saw the child slowly opening his eyelashes trembling, and when he saw her, his eye circles turned red, and he shouted, "Mother!" The grievance in his voice almost reached the sky. He even choked up a bit, "I thought you didn't want me anymore." The wife, who originally wanted to keep a straight face in front of him, was suddenly red-eyed by these words, and could no longer be serious. She touched the head of the little boy in front of her and said softly, "Why wouldn't mother want us, brother? Don't cry anymore, you can't cry when you are sick." Ji Chang still looked aggrieved. He is now 13 years old. Even if he is considered to be an age that can be used by ordinary people, if he falls into a good family, unless he is the eldest son who has to be trained since childhood to inherit the family property, in the eyes of the elders, he is still just a person. A child. He was raised by a noble family, but he suddenly got slapped with a slap in the face. Even if he had done something wrong, how could he hold back and not feel aggrieved? Seeing that he was about to cry but stubbornly holding back, MRSG felt distressed and helpless. She took the handkerchief carefully handed over by Tien Mo and gently wiped the tears on the young boy's face. Nagays, you have been naughty in the past, and your reputation in the capital is not very good. Others think you are a playboy. It doesn't matter. As long as you study well, get a good name in the future, and your elder brother takes care of you, you will still be able to behave well in the future. But you should never should, ruin the reputation of a girl from a good family. She is a girl from a good family, and she has suffered such an unreasonable disaster. If you don't marry her, she will have no choice but to die. You shouldn't go responsible. Ji Chang still looked aggrieved and confused. I like her very much, but if I am responsible, wouldn't it be nice to take her as my concubine? Isn't there only a 7th-rank official in her family? Isn't there a 7th-rank official in my father's backyard? My aunt? Why can't I take her as my concubine? After hearing this, MRSG cursed in her heart. I knew Brother Ju wouldn't suddenly flirt with someone for no reason, and yet he was so irresponsible. It turned out that someone had led him astray. She was anxious, but in front of the child, MRSG couldn't speak ill of his biological father. She could only endure the tone for the time being and whispered, "This is different. The Aunt Jo you are talking about is from her family. In order to please your father, I took the initiative and carried the sedan to the door. That girl from the Zheng family didn't want to have anything to do with you. It was you who got drunk and grabbed her, ruining her reputation. The Zheng family is a scholarly family, and reputation is the most important thing. This is why her family loves her. Otherwise, if she were caught by a strange man in the street, it would be possible for her to die and preserve the family's reputation. If Ji Chang's is unwilling to marry, then even if Miss Zheng's family loves her, the world will force her to death." Seeing that Ji Chang still had a look of confusion on his face, as if he still didn't understand why the other party wanted to get married after just teasing her, MRSG was filled with confusion. On the one hand, I knew in my heart that it was normal for this child to be coddled and grew up to be ignorant, but on the other hand, I was afraid that he really didn't take a human life seriously. If the child she raised with her own hands became as cold-hearted and ruthless as his own father, who did not treat women as human beings but only indulged in female sex, then she would really be angry to death. He simply said cruelly, "Brother Ninth, you have already done something wrong. If you don't know how to repent and make amends, then mother will not help you anymore." The 9th brother of the Ji family seemed to be frightened, and he didn't know whether he heard it or not. Anyway, he was crying so hard that he couldn't sleep. He tightly grasped his aunt's sleeves with his hands, twitching and promising, ninth brother, listen to your mother, I will be responsible, and I will marry Miss Zheng. I will be obedient from now on and won't go out to tease girls or go shopping in flower houses. I won't buy fans or those antique jade bottles and gold and silver bottles. Mother, don't ignore me." It's not like he really knew he was wrong, but he agreed because he was afraid that MRSG would no longer love him. MRSG's heart softened, but she was not too harsh on this aspect. She would just teach her slowly in the future. After all, it was the child she raised. Even if it seemed to be crooked, she didn't think about the other person's nature being crooked. Instead, she put the blame on the child's biological father. If the other party hadn't set a good example and let Brother Ju see Ying Yan in this yard since he was a child, the child would have felt that the woman he liked should be his concubine at a young age, regardless of whether she was a good family girl or not. The summary is that children are good, but they are brought up bad. It's better to break it off now while it's still possible. MRSG no longer wants her little son to be rich and talented, but she only wants him to have a normal outlook on life, a sense of responsibility, and the ability to distinguish right from wrong. As long as he doesn't grow up like his biological father, he is a good boy. MRSG left. Ji Chang's lay back and watched the other party's back leave. He closed his eyes and replayed his memories. Although MRSG loved the original owner, she immediately felt threatened as soon as she discovered that the other person was showing signs of becoming crooked. Originally, with her vigilance, the original owner would not have become crooked so quickly. His crooked appearance was not only caused by his biological aunt, such as his aunt, but also because of other people's contributions. It is true that Master Ji is the only son of the Ho family, but the old lady above is not Master Ji's biological mother. Some people don't want MRSG to control the Ho family and live a smooth life. Ji Chang's went through the few people who served around MRSG in his mind, and quickly settled on a person who often said some specious words in front of the original owner. MRSG's right-hand nanny, Mother Lu. Over there, as soon as MRSG left Ji Chang's yard, her face immediately became angry. Mother Lu next to her saw it and hurriedly said, "Madam, don't be angry. Didn't Brother Ninth agree to marry Miss Zhang? Although now I still feel a little unhappy, but at least I have accepted it. It's just that Brother Ninth is so old and still so ignorant. He is already ill. Yesterday he was thinking about buying a gold and silver vase." If Liu's mother said this in normal times, MRSG would have frowned, thinking that the child didn't learn a lesson, and would have deducted his monthly payment. But today, when MRSG heard what Liu's mother said, the pitiful look of Ji Chang's holding her sleeve tightly and refusing to let go immediately came to mind. And he was told that, and he was confused and didn't know where he was wrong, and his eyes were at a loss and aggrieved. She didn't take care of him for just 2 days, but the child who was so hurt by her hand could faint from anger. This shows how powerful the people in the home mansion are to follow the crowd. Since you want to buy it, send someone to buy it for him, so as not to let those evil-hearted people think that he has lost their favor. Mother Liu's face froze. This plot is wrong. A gold and silver vase is expensive. Shouldn't the wife reprimand young Master Ninth for not repenting and only having fun? She tentatively said, "Madam, the mistake this time. Master Ninth made a mistake, he can't just punish him and it will be fine, right? If she is not punished, how can she sow discord?" MRSG, yes, how can we ignore this mistake? Mother Lu was overjoyed, but before her eyes showed any joy, she heard MRSG say, "It's all the master's fault. If it weren't for him, Brother Ninth wouldn't be like this. You let me know when the master is back." Mother Lu. "Lao, sir. What does this have to do with the master? Shouldn't Master Ninth be punished?" However, after finishing speaking, MRSG had already walked forward in a hurry with angry eyes. Mother Lu was left standing there, looking at the other persons retreating back. Confused and at a loss. Behi free and fastest update, no anti-theft, no anti-theft. You are listening to novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Everyone knows I'm a good man. Author, Tang Zhongmao. Chapter 303. Of course, Ji Chang's, who was recovering from illness, didn't know about MRSG's passing the blame to Master Ji. He could feel that he was not actually that uncomfortable. Even if MRSG acted in anger, she would still be measured and would not really break the bastard she raised by her side. The girls and boys waiting in the room may have been frightened by his fainting before. They were very attentive to Ji Chang's all afternoon. No one dared to go out anymore, for fear that as soon as they left the ninth young master, they would see him when they turned around. He fainted and did not know whether he was alive or dead. Tim Mo is young and doesn't have a long memory. He was frightened by MRSG just now. He turned to his master Ji Chang's and muttered. Every time you see Ant are you always feel unhappy. You have been unhappy for a while, and today you are so angry that you fainted. But every time you see Ant are you get angry every time. I really don't know why. What are you trying to figure out? Picture what? The original owner naturally looked down upon Ant are you, who was not very powerful. But except for Ant are you, no one else in the yard dared to talk in front of him, saying something like MRSG couldn't forgive him. Even Master G, a scumbag, couldn't say a single bad word to MRSG for raising this bastard. The original owner felt that he was extremely wronged, and no one could tell the truth. Auntie RU, who came to instigate from time to time, naturally became the more eloquent person in his mind. Naturally, Ji Chang certainly couldn't answer like this. He just propped himself up as if he was very weak, and whispered, "After all, she was my biological aunt. My aunt passed away early. If she were still alive, she would definitely be happy to see my aunt caring for me like this." Tim Mo pouted. Brother Ninth's words make no sense. I heard that Aunt Lu was sold since she was a child. The wife paid the deed of betrayal. She has never gotten along with Aunt RU. Maybe she doesn't even recognize what Aunt RU looks like. He is the servant who serves the ninth young master, and he usually feels well informed, so he naturally knows about Aunt RU's situation. Tim Mo belongs to Master Ninth. In the past, even though Brother Ninth would be unhappy for a long time every time he saw Aunt RU, he didn't dare to say anything. But today, Ninth Brother was so angry that he looked like he had been greatly wronged. Naturally, he wanted to complain about his master. To put it bluntly, except for the master, his wife, and the eldest brother, their master didn't need to look at anyone else's expressions in the whole house. Why should he be so condescending as to be so angry with an aunt? The wife couldn't bear to say a few words to Brother Ju. What kind of person is an aunt who came together by herself? Ji Chang saw Tim Mo's indignation and knew what the other person was thinking, but Chang remained calm and just sighed. She is an elder after all. She comes to me. How can I not accept her? The more he behaved like this, the less favorable impression Tim Mo had on Aunt RU. He just asked, "Brother Ju, what did Aunt RU say to you before? How can such an open-minded person like you be so angry?" "It's nothing. It's just that I'm not good at literature or martial arts, and my wife has an elder brother who doesn't look down on me." Ji Chang spoke in an understatement, but his eyes were a little sad. "I thought, maybe the wife is really angry with me. After all, I am not the wife's biological son. I made her angry before and even talked back to her. As my aunt said, that's right, I was raised by my wife, so I shouldn't provoke her and wait for her to abandon me. I don't know how I will live in the future." Tim Mo heard this and quickly comforted him. How could it be possible? My wife loves my brother the most. Brother Ju, please don't take someone else's words seriously. Drink this medicine and go to sleep. Ji Chang shook his head, as if he felt that his aunt was right, but he didn't know how to express it. He lowered his head and drank the medicine, then lay down and closed his eyes to sleep. And in the room, there were more than one or two people who heard him and Tim Mo talking. One of the maids blinked and carefully cleaned the room. Before exiting, she checked whether Ji Chang's had a fever and left after confirming that there was no problem. After going out, they went all the way to MRSG's yard and told MRSG exactly what Ji Chang said. Boom. When MRSG was young, she was a good-natured person who never made friends with others. After marrying her current unreliable husband, she was very angry. She had to suffer a lot of grievances and suffered a lot before finally cultivating her. Now this character. After hearing this, she slammed the table angrily. Before, she thought Brother Jew was young, so she didn't go to see him for a few days, so she had random thoughts in her mind. Unexpectedly, it turned out that someone was behind it. Brother Jew was still ill, and Aunt Ru went over and made irresponsible remarks, which made the child anxious and fainted. What was her intention? Maybe she can only say a few words to Master G and his wife, but she has a natural advantage over Aunt Ru. Pass it to me, just say that if Auntie goes to visit Brother Jew, who is recovering from his illness, let her rest in the yard for a few months, and wait until she recovers before going to serve the master. There are too many ways to deal with an aunt, and the most direct way is to ground her. Didn't she ignore her order and insist on seeing Brother Jew? Since those legs are not obedient, don't use them for the time being. MRSG finally showed mercy, thinking that the other party was Juger's biological aunt and Juger's biological mother's biological sister, so she just let her stay for a few months. But after this incident, coupled with Ji Chang's previous reaction that he was afraid that she would leave him, and the fact that he naturally thought it would be better to just take a concubine after he flirted with the actress, MRSG suddenly had a thought in her heart. Guess. She asked the girl, did Aunt Ru often look for Brother Jew before? The girl didn't dare to lie, so she told the truth. Auntie Ru was fine when she first entered the house. She started talking to Brother Jew frequently some time ago. Every time she spoke, she asked us to leave, so I don't know what they said. But every time Aunt Ru finishes talking, ninth brother is in a bad mood. Usually as soon as Aunt Ru leaves, he goes out to play with the young men outside, and doesn't come back until dark. What she said was indeed true. After all, what the original owner wanted was to become the true and only young master, and every time Aunt Ru came to do something to him, she reminded the original owner that he was just a bastard. His status is simply not comparable to the elder brother who came before him. If it weren't for MRSG, he wouldn't even be as good as his younger brothers and sisters. If you feel depressed, why don't you go out and play to calm down the resentment in your heart? But MRSG didn't think about it at all. The main reason was that Ji Chang's confused and pitiful look before, with no idea what he had done wrong, played a role. Brother Jew had no idea whether what he did was right or wrong. He admitted his mistake not because he found out that he was wrong, but simply because he was afraid that she would be angry. Why had I never seen this child so afraid of her leaving him? Mingming was still naughty and lawless when he was a child. At that time, he was obedient in reading and seemed to be very sensible. How could it be possible that the bigger you get, the less you can tell right from wrong? Why is it that the older the children get, the less they understand things? Most of them were taught by someone. Although Mr. G didn't seem to have appeared much, it didn't affect MRSG's mental note for him. But now, Aunt Ru has replaced Master G and become the biggest culprit in MRSG's mind. It must be her. In the past, ninth brother was very well behaved, he didn't dare to wave before his wings were strong, and he had never done anything ridiculous like flirting with a playgirl. He didn't know how to appreciate beauties before his hair grew. After Auntie entered the house, Brother Jew became erratic day by day, and his reputation in the capital gradually became bad. It must be that Aunt Ru has been instilling some messy things into this child, making him sensitive, thoughtful, fragile, and self-indulgent. The more MRSG thought about it, the more she felt that this was the case. Otherwise, why would Brother Jew look so sure that she would not want him? The child's usual publicity was all disguised, and he didn't know how fragile and scared he was in his heart. It's a shame that she usually has to manage the housework and deal with Mr. G's troublesome affairs, so she actually neglected Brother Jew. If she had been watching all the way, Brother Jew would definitely not be like this. MRSG sat in her seat, and Chang looked like he was just drinking tea, but in fact, he mentally reviewed all the candidates who could lead Ji Chang's into trouble. In the end, the blame was successfully placed on Mr. Ji and are you getting angrier and angrier? It's all the fault of these two people. If it weren't for them, Brother Ju wouldn't be like this. I used to learn well, but now that I am older, I am becoming less and less motivated. It's definitely not that he doesn't want to make progress, but that on the one hand, there is a contrary example like Mr. G waiting for him, and on the other hand, it's like his aunt is constantly instigating and holding him back. By the way, there are also those little friends outside of him. If it weren't for them, how could Brother Ju's well-behaved personality become what he is now? Mother Lu saw that MRSG's face was getting darker and darker as she didn't know what she was thinking of. She felt happy and asked tentatively, "Madam, are you thinking about Brother Ju?" MRSG nodded, still as calm as water. Mother Lu was even more happy. Sure enough, he was angry again. Brother Ninth was raised under the knee of his wife, and he even went to get close to his mother's sister. He couldn't blame MRSG for being angry. This is a good opportunity. She seized the opportunity and said quickly, "Madam, don't be angry, this matter is not Brother Ju's fault. Of course this is not Brother Ninth's fault. They are all those evil-hearted people. If it weren't for them, Brother Ninth wouldn't be like this." Mother Lu. She had a bad feeling. But Liu's mother still tried hard to mention the old lady. What the madam said is true, but think about it, the old lady may have some ideas. No matter what, the old lady should be exposed in this matter and take advantage of it. MRSG came up and brought her thoughtfully. Seeing that she had listened, Liu's mother was overjoyed, thinking that her insinuation had worked. Then she saw a slight expression of anger on MRSG's face. "You mean, the old lady is also responsible for leading Brother Ninth into trouble?" Mother Lu. She didn't say, it wasn't her. "Madam, this is not what I meant." MRSG slapped the table and suddenly realized, that's right. Brother Ninth also went to the old lady to say hello. It seems that his temper gradually became arrogant, and he started getting closer to the old lady. "Mother Lu, madam, things are not what you think." MRSG thought carefully about Ji Chang's life circle, and no matter how she thought about it, she felt that the old lady who liked to find trouble with her the most was suspicious. It is true, I can't blame it, hee hee. Mother Lu. She felt that she had better shut up. Behe free and fastest update, no anti-theft, no anti-theft. Everyone knows I'm a good man. Author, Tang Zhongmao. Chapter 304. Ji Chang's was recuperating in the house. Naturally, he didn't know what was going on outside, but fortunately he still had a loyal servant named Tianmo. This boy is young, has a sweet mouth, and is the personal servant of Brother Ninth who is kept by his wife. In the entire home mansion, no matter what he does, the servants are willing to give him a little favor. Tim Mo was also afraid that Ji Chang's would be bored sitting alone in the house, so he would ask around for gossip every day to share with his master. The next morning, he told the story about the big quarrel between his wife and the master. "I don't know what the reason for the quarrel was. The master was very angry. I went to Aunt Hu's house yesterday. I heard that she even scolded the eldest brother. She also said that the eldest brother was weak because of the medicine he drank. He needed to stop taking the medicine." Woolen cloth. Tim Mo's face was full of joy. Fortunately, Madam rushed over quickly and moved Mr. Ho out. Mr. Ho sent someone to take him away, otherwise the eldest brother would have been frightened and wouldn't be allowed to drink medicine. Not sure what to do yet. Ji Chang's listened quietly, thoughtfully. In the memory of the original owner, Mr. Ji always appeared in front of him as an image of severe reprimands, but the original owner, who had always held grudges, did not remember his father's grudge. Instead, he respected and yearned for him more and more. After all, in the original owner's mind, if his father didn't value him, how could he care about his studies? Didn't you see that among so many brothers, apart from the eldest brother, was he the only one who would be reprimanded by his father? But if you think about it carefully, every time Mr. G suddenly comes out to scold his son, it is after he and MRSG have finished their conflict. He couldn't talk to MRSG, nor could he make MRSG sad by doting on concubines like he did when they first got married. After all, MRSG had no interest in him now, and even if he brought back 100 concubines, she would only will tell the other party whatever. So Master G came to scold her two precious sons. She made MRSG feel distressed by hitting Ji Chang's and the sickly elder brother, but she couldn't say anything. After all, he was the father of two children. It was natural for a father to teach his son. If she stopped him, it would be useless. It will also give rise to the reputation of a loving mother with many failed children. Mr. G is in his early 40s this year and has been an official for 20 years. He has a group of children, 13 daughters and 22 sons. Whether he is out or at home, he is in a good mood. Is he relying on himself? No, he relies on Mr. Ho's father when he goes out, and MRSG helps him take care of the housework and takes care of the children at home. Otherwise, just because he only cares about beauty and ignores his family. Her family background means taking concubines, and she doesn't even bother to take a look at the child after giving birth, so the backyard has long been in chaos. Not only was he ashamed of this, but he also used his child as a tool to suppress MRSG. It's hard to describe in words. As expected by Ji Chang's, Tim Majeng said that young master so-and-so had a fight with young master so-and-so, and young lady so-and-so embroidered a pillow for MRSG with her own hands. When MRSG praised her, she closed it down because he was recovering from illness. The door of the room was opened vigorously from the outside. Master G walked in. To be honest, Mr. G has good facial features, but his long-term indulgence has caused him to age much faster than his peers. Coupled with two big tears and dark circles under his eyes, wrinkles on his face and a long beard, he is clearly in his 40s. Years old, he is definitely much older than his peers. And when he had a cold face, he looked even older. He first glanced at the servants in the room and said coldly, "Get out of here." The servants looked at Ji Chang's with worried faces, especially Tian Mo, who almost had worry written on his face. Ji Chang's also shivered in cooperation, holding Tim Mo's hand to prevent him from leaving as if he was very scared. In fact, while the two were getting close, he quickly whispered to Tim Mo, "Go and ask someone to ask Grandpa to help." Tim Mo nodded quickly. In the courtyard where the old man lived, Brother Ju was closest. If he wanted to ask an elder for help, naturally the old man would be faster. The other servants were also worried, but after all, Mr. G was their serious master. No matter how much they didn't want to leave Ji Chang's alone, they could only go out with 1 step and 3 turns. Ji Chang's was still thinking about how to treat Mr. G, but now he saw him clearing people out by himself, and he was immediately happy. He was just thinking about how difficult it would be to reply in front of so many servants. This is really like having someone give you a pillow when you feel sleepy. Mr. G didn't notice the expression on his son's face. When the people were cleared away, he started to fire. "I looked through your homework, what happened to you? How did you end up like this? Did all the books you read for so many years end up in a dog's belly?" This is probably the only clever thing about Mr. G. Every time he comes to express his anger at his sons, he always finds an excuse. Isn't it normal for a father to be angry with his son for not doing well in his homework? In the past, the original owner thought it was normal, and even thought that if his father didn't care about him, why would he be so close to him? He cares about his own homework and is strict in the hope that he can become a talented person. Now, The little boy on the bed seemed to want to get out of bed and salute, but as soon as he got up, he seemed to have no strength. He could only lean on the head of the bed and explain in a low voice. My son caught wind and cold before and was dizzy. His writing was inevitably worse than before. My husband also knew this and allowed his son to go home to recuperate. What happened? In the past, didn't the son always apologize directly and then fall into self-blame with guilt on his face? Why did he explain it honestly? After reacting, Master G became even more angry. He came here specifically to make his son wilt down after being scolded so that MRSG would know the consequences of going against him, not to hear an explanation. I won't go to school at the slightest hint of cold, and I won't be able to endure even the slightest hardship. No matter how you take the scientific examination in the future, if you were placed in a poor family, you would have starved to death. This chapter. You really followed your own mother's lowly behavior. How come my noble family has an heir like you who doesn't know how to make progress? Saying this to any 13-year-old boy will definitely make him feel ashamed and inferior, making him want to find a crack in the ground and crawl into it. However, Ji Chang's is not. He raised his eyes as if he was very angry. Not only did he not lower his head and repent as his father wanted, but he replied again. If the father thought that his son's biological mother was low, why would he take her as his concubine? If the son's biological mother was low and unworthy of his father, how could the son be born? Seeing Master Ji stunned, Ji Chang's continued to type. Father said that his son didn't know how to make progress, but father, didn't you still fail to get on the list several times in the exam? Why are you still angry when your son follows you like this? Master Ji looked in disbelief at the son in front of him who dared to argue with him, and his face was livid with anger. You! How dare you talk about being a father? Ji Chang's, my son doesn't dare. Isn't what my son told the truth? Do you dare? Anyway, the door is closed and no one can hear you. So what if he gets angry? You. Even though Mr. G looks happy every day, that is only for his friends and at home. He is nothing in the court, and this is also Mr. G's own concern. Now that he was exposed by his 13-year-old son, how could he not become angry with shame? Mr. G's hands were trembling with anger. He pointed at Ji Chang's for a long time, and finally decided to solve the problem by force. He looked around the room several times and couldn't find anything suitable for him, so he turned around and pushed the door angrily. Then almost immediately Ji Chang's panicked voice came from inside the house, "Someone is coming. Someone is coming. Father is going to beat me to death." Tim Mo reacted first, rushed in and stood in front of Ji Chang's bed. Master, we can't fight. Brother Ninth is still feverish, and his injuries haven't healed yet." Ji Chang showed his head behind Tian Mo, with a sad expression on his face. "The doctor said that my son should take a good rest, otherwise his condition will definitely worsen." "Father, you are very angry. If your son recovers, your son will be at your disposal." As he spoke, he seemed to be stimulated by Master G's behavior and coughed violently. Cough, 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 cough. "Father, please love your son." Cough, cough. Tim Mo was startled and quickly knelt down. "Master, we really can't beat him. Look at how Brother Ninth has been beaten. Please, Master, please let Brother Ninth go today." This chapter. The servants next to me also knelt down beside the bed and begged, "Please, Master, please let Brother Ninth go." He was so angry that he didn't even touch Ji Chang's with a finger, and now he inexplicably turned into Ji Chang's like this. Master Ji who he beat out. He was so angry that the hand holding the stick was shaking. "You cheap slaves dare to stop me? Get away." There was a commotion in the house, and MRSG, who hurried over after receiving the news, arrived with her people. She also knew that she might not be able to stop Mr. G if he really committed a crime, So she gritted her teeth and sent people to the old Marquis to ask for help. What is this fuss about? When she saw the stick in Master G's hand and the little son hiding behind Tim Mo, her face darkened. When Mr. G saw her coming, he sneered. This is the cleverness of him driving people out just now. No one knew what he said to Ji Chang's just now, so what he said to Ji Chang's just now, naturally they can only let him be fooled. It's time to draw a picture as a father. After all, how can a son dare to refute his father's words? Mr. G cleared his throat, regained his composure, and said, "Look at the good son you taught, he." Mother. Mother. Mr. G's eyes widened as he watched Ji Chang's, who had been stabbing him lukewarmly when no one was around, immediately became weak, pitiful, and aggrieved as soon as he came to MRSG's side. That look made it look as if the person who just stabbed his painful spot was not him. Ji Chang sobbed and complained with a sad look on his face. Mother. My father said that his son didn't know how to make progress. He also said that his son had followed the lowliness of his biological mother. Just now, he beat his son with a stick. Mother, I don't know what my son has done wrong. To make my father hate me so much, I can only say nothing. Let your father handle it. With that said, Ji Chang's looked back at the stunned Master Ji and the old Marquis who had just entered the yard. Added another sentence, I also said that grandfather can't control it. This chapter. You think this will work? Mr. G, who was always the best at lecturing his son behind closed doors and evading the easy ones when the door was opened, almost laughed out loud at this familiar slap on the back. You traitor! Don't talk about your mother or grandfather today. Even if my grandfather comes, I will still beat you to death here. Ji Chang shrank, as if he was extremely frightened, and with red eyes pitifully called out to the courtyard door, Grandpa. Mr. G sneered, It's useless even if you call me grandfather, he is in charge of heaven and earth, and he can't bear to let me beat my son. I am not. He looked at MRSG Changzaji who was staring behind him, his words stopped suddenly, and he finally realized something. Keeping the posture of holding the stick in hand, slowly turned around and faced the expressionless face of the old Marquis. Father, father. The old Marquis stretched out his hand, give it to me. Mr. G. He carefully handed over the stick, and when the other party raised the stick, he tried to tell the other party the truth. Father, please listen to my explanation. Don't hit. Ouch. Reading tip, the system has detected that the next page of the current chapter cannot be loaded. Please click the middle of the screen, click the lower right corner or the upper right corner to find the close reading button to read the complete novel content. Behi free and fastest update, no anti-theft, no anti-theft. Everyone knows I'm a good man. Author, Tang Zhonmao. Chapter 305. To be honest, when Mr. G was young, Mr. Marquis could even be said to be pampered towards him. The old Marquis may not be said to be very talented or honest, but he is indeed an ordinary, normal person. Faced with his only child, no matter how bastard he is, thinking about it, he will only be like this in his life. Since he has blood, he can only admit it with gritted teeth. But that doesn't mean he doesn't care about his grandchildren. These are all the blood of the G family. Even though the old Marquis has not cultivated much affection with these grandsons, he still cares about them after all. After seeing his useless son beating his grandson with sticks and speaking rudely to his own father, the old Marquis skillfully held down Mr. G and beat him severely. Of course, the servants all left before the beating. Ji Chang's, the master of the suffering, and his wife, MRSG, both stayed behind to watch this father-to-son ceremony. The old Marquis went to the battlefield at the age of 20 and fought bravely for 30 years. Although he is too old to go to the battlefield, he can still eat 4 large bowls of rice at a meal and go to the martial arts field to practice spear dancing every morning. This body is much better than that of Mr. G, who had long been exhausted due to his daily indulgence in drinking and sex. After being held down, he was beaten and howled, but the old Marquis knew exactly what kind of temper his son had. No matter how miserable he screamed, he still beat him 15 times before letting go. Seeing Master G fall to the ground and cry for father and mother, MRSG's eyes flashed with joy. Seeing that she didn't stop her, the old Marquis sighed in his heart. When the daughter-in-law got married in the early years, she was still very obedient to the treacherous son, and the two of them fell in love for a while. However, since the treacherous son brought in concubines one after another and humiliated her several times in person, MRSG gradually, I no longer treat my husband as wholeheartedly as before. Who can blame this? Although the old Marquis himself was a man, he didn't really think that men could pamper their concubines and destroy their wives. MRSG's natal family was also a big family, and she was raised to be a noble person. However, after marrying this rebellious son, she almost had her face stepped on. The eldest grandson Chanjun was originally very healthy when he was born, but Master G spoiled his concubine and destroyed his wife. The concubine wanted to take away the housekeeping rights and attacked Ji Chanjun. The child almost died. MRSG almost followed her, waiting for her to regain her strength and investigate while taking care of her son. She finally found out the truth and threw it in front of Mr. G, hoping that he could seek justice for their son. Mr. G actually chose to protect that concubine. It was the old Marquis himself who got the news and personally dealt with the concubine who dared to murder his legitimate son. Master G was extremely heartbroken at that time. However, within half a month, he took in a new beautiful concubine and completely forgot about her. After this incident, MRSG never expressed any opinions on his concubines, and only firmly held the housekeeping power in her own hands. Her husband has created a lot of bastards and concubines. It is already very remarkable that she can treat these bastards and concubines well, arrange them well, and marry them off. Thinking of the troubles that this rebellious son had in the backyard, the old Marquis rubbed his eyebrows and said, "You went to Changjian's room before to prevent him from taking medicine, and now you come to Chang's to beat the child indiscriminately. But now he's still. I'm sick. Are you still a father?" Mr. G really felt that he was wronged. "I am so indiscriminate, but this traitor dares to talk back to me. If he dares to refute what my father said, how can he not be beaten?" The old Marquis chuckled, "Then what are you doing now, Mr. G?" He glanced at his biological father and suddenly withered. When he looked up, he saw Ji Chang standing behind MRSG looking at him. Good guy, the gloating in his eyes was almost coming out. Mr. G immediately became energetic. "Father. Look at Brother Ju, look at his unruly look." The old Marquis turned his head and faced his grandson's face, which had red eyes and was shivering in fear. He suddenly felt angry and raised his hand to strike with a stick. "You still dare to confuse right and wrong here." Master G was beaten with a stick, confused and aggrieved. He looked at Ji Chang's again and saw a sarcastic smile emerging from the corner of his mouth. "Father, look. Look." The old Marquis turned around, and Ji Chang's carefully pinched the corner of MRSG's clothes. The mood in his eyes changed quickly, and he timidly shouted, "Grandpa, the grandson doesn't." This time Master G clearly saw the two faces of his son. You still dare to pretend? You unfilial son, try pretending again." "Ouch. Father, why are you hitting me?" The old Marquis almost laughed out of anger. "Why am I beating you? How old are you? To scare a child like this? That's your biological son. I think your wife loves Nagasawa more than you do." Ji Changs took advantage of the opportunity, inserted it weakly, and said with sobs, "Grandpa doesn't know something. Father treats his grandson like this just because his mother loves him more." Under Master G's disbelieving gaze, he cried as if in fear, while shaking his head cleanly about what the other party had done. Usually, when my father quarrels with his mother, he comes to his yard to punish his grandson. The same goes for my elder brother. Every time, my father punishes him behind closed doors and does not let his grandson speak out after the punishment. This time, my sons and grandsons are really afraid that they will be beaten to death by their father. Mr. G's eyes widened. You fart. When have I ever hit you? I just scolded you a few words. While talking with a face full of indignation, he suddenly felt something was wrong, touched the cold back of his neck, and slowly turned around. Then he met the old Marquis's face, which was as serious as water. Mr. G. Old Marquis, so, this matter is true. Master G, father, please listen to my explanation, this matter is not what you imagined, ouch. Mr. G was beaten again. This time Mr. Ho was really angry and merciless. When the beating was over, Mr. G couldn't get up. I've known before that you have a bad temper and that you have no tolerance for others. I didn't expect that you wouldn't even let go of your own son. The old Marquis was really angry this time. He didn't even know what kind of evil he had done, and why he gave birth to such a thing. Compared with Mr. G, Nagasawa, who has a bad reputation outside and is arrogant and willful at home, can be considered outstanding. You are not allowed to go out during this period. Please take care of yourself. If you let me know what stupid things you have done again, I will break your legs. Ji Chang's raised his sleeves and wiped the tears from the corners of his eyes. As if he was frightened by the scene of his grandfather teaching his father, he slowly plucked up the courage and moved to Mr. G's side in small steps, reaching out to hold his arm. She looked like she was about to pull him up. While pulling him, she said timidly in a very low voice, "Father, are you okay?" Then he pinched Master G's inner tender flesh hard. Master G's face suddenly twisted in pain, and he waved him away with one hand. "You traitor! You!" Ah! Ji Chang seemed to have been pushed down hard and fell to the ground, his face full of confusion. Seeing this, the old Marquis became even more angry. "You still don't know how to repent at this time." Master G was shocked with pain. He quickly explained, "Father, this rebellious son." "Shut up." The old Marquis obviously lost his patience. "From now on, you are not allowed to say a word." Naturally, the old Marquis did not forget to express his condolences to the frightened Ji Chang's. "Brother Ninth, there is no need to be afraid of your father. I am still alive. If he does such stupid things again, just come and find me." Facing Master G's hateful eyes, Ji Chang's lived up to expectations and stood up slowly and timidly. After Mr. G had already admitted the guilt, he added some more descriptions. Even if the other party denies it, what he says has no credibility due to his dark history. He seemed to be worried and confirmed again, "Grandpa, will you really take care of your father?" The old Marquis just thought that the child was frightened, and tried to calm him down with a soft voice. "Of course, don't worry, as long as I'm here in the future, your father won't be able to do anything bad." The face of the handsome young man slowly showed a look of reassurance. Under MRSG's distressed and comforting sight of the old Marquis, he seemed to be very careful and asked, "Then, will my grandson be able to learn from others in the future and not have to hide his clumsiness?" As soon as the words came out, the old Marquis and MRSG were stunned. The meaning of this sentence is obviously that Mr. G is suppressing his son and preventing him from showing his true strength. He is Nagasawa's biological father. The old Marquis and MRSG all looked at Master G in disbelief, who was barely getting up and sitting on the ground. Mr. G's heart was filled with pain just now, and he didn't even notice what Ji Chang said. As soon as he sat upright, he received such a look and was stunned. "Why are you looking at him like that all of a sudden?" Seeing that Mr. G didn't refute, the old Marquis even looked disapproving, bewildered. He was about to be shaken by this unfilial son's anger. He looked like he had lost his temper, shaking his hands and scolding. You. I've known for a long time that you are narrow-minded. You don't want others to be better than you. I didn't expect that you are even jealous of your own son. Mr. G, who was sitting on the ground in a daze, said, "Huh, Lily free and fastest update, no anti-theft, no anti-theft. You are listening to novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Everyone knows I'm a good man." Author, Tang Zhonmao. Chapter 306. Mr. G was really confused, and Mr. Ho was really angry. The most important thing in a family is the prosperity of the whole family. If you want to revitalize the family, it is definitely not possible to rely on one person. It requires the efforts of the whole family. Some families can produce only one outstanding person in a generation, and they can be famous for a while, but if there is no successor, they will still end up in nothing. But if the whole family has talents in large numbers, or if there are not so many talents but are average and excellent, the family can continue to be prosperous for hundreds of years. A family is not just a family that works together because of the same surname. But now, Mr. G has actually done something evil that prohibits his son from pursuing a career. In the eyes of the old Marquis, this is much more serious than him finding an excuse to come over and bully his grandson. His face was livid with anger, and he was about to hit him with the stick. When he was in the air, he felt that the stick was still too light, and he started to touch his waist. Mr. G, who was in a daze, saw that something was wrong. He didn't cry out that he was in pain or pretend that he couldn't get up. He jumped up and ran away. Sure enough, the next second the old Marquis drew out his saber, and his face was so angry that there were a few more wrinkles. He held the knife and chased after him, yelling, "You traitor! Do you still dare to run? Stop! If you obey and stand still at this time, wouldn't you be waiting for death?" Mr. G ran out of the yard without thinking. So naturally, he missed this only opportunity to defend himself. The old Marquis did not chase after him. After all, he was his own son. Even if he was very angry, he would not really hack the opponent to death. He only hung up the sword with a loud gasp of anger. "Nagaze, what happened? Your father asked you to hide your stupidity." Ji Chang's eyes turned red and he lowered his head slightly. He didn't speak as if he wanted to say something but didn't dare. He just nodded slowly. At this time, silence was better than sound. Thanks to Mr. G's many unreliable deeds in the past, MRSG and the old man came up with all kinds of plots that made them hate each other in just a moment. Seeing that poor little Nagasawa seemed to be petrified and his body was trembling slightly, MRSG's eyes warmed up and she hugged him. "My son, why don't you come and talk to your mother? I'll tell you, you were very knowledgeable when you were young. Why did you suddenly not want to make progress? I even blamed you. It turns out this is the reason. Why are you so stupid? You told your mother, can mother still watch you destroy your future?" Ji Chang sobbed and choked, "Father, there is a gap between father and mother. I dare not." As soon as these words came out, MRSG's heart softened even more, and she hugged him tighter. "My son." The mother and son cried together, looking very miserable. The old Marquis looked on and felt very uncomfortable. A good daughter-in-law and a good grandson, what have they been done to by this traitorous son? He didn't know what else to say. He could only promise, "Your father did something wrong indeed. If he dares to do similar things in the future, just come to me and I will teach him a lesson. You should study hard and don't listen to your father. It's not his turn to make the decision in our palace. If you need anything you want to use, just go to your mother. If your mother doesn't have it, come to me." If your father comes again, if you scold you, tell grandpa and grandpa will seek justice for you. Ji Chang still looked like a resigned and pitiful little boy, wiping away tears. Father always teaches his grandson behind closed doors. I'm afraid that even if his grandson begs in front of his grandfather, unless he catches him on the spot, his father will definitely not admit it. Seeing his grandson in such a pitiful state, the old Marquis felt more pity and distress in his heart. What a good child, why is that traitorous son so ignorant of cherishing him? He promised, if he dares to do this, I will definitely teach him a lesson. Ji Chang's was relieved. With the words of the old Marquis, it will be whatever he says in the future. In the distance, Mr. Ji, who ran out of the yard in a hurry, finally stopped by the lake and sneezed heavily. You're so good, why are you sneezing? Mr. Ji thought for a while and suddenly realized. Someone must be thinking about him. No way. His popularity is so good. Behe free and fastest update, no anti-theft, no anti-theft. Everyone knows I'm a good man. Author, Tang Zhonmao. Chapter 307. Ji Chang's didn't know if Mr. Ji was dragged back and beaten by the old Marquis later. But he learned from Timo, who was keen on gossip, that the old Marquis had personally spoken and said that Master Ji would be deducted from Master Ji's monthly payment for 5 months. During these 5 months, Master Ji could eat and drink in the mansion, but if he wanted to get money from the accountant, it's definitely not possible to spend money to be happy. I heard that Mr. Ji was very depressed for 2 days, but he soon became happy again because his friends outside took the initiative to bear his expenses. Therefore, even if he has no money, he can still live out his life and be a great man. When Tim Mo said this, he felt a little admiration for Master Ji. After all, no one in the house knew that Master Ji spent a lot of money. Although he has many friends, none of them have a good family background and don't have much money. Under such circumstances, they are willing to pay for Master Ji. What a good relationship it takes to do that. After hearing this, Ji Chang's just smiled and didn't interrupt. As the saying goes, those who are close to red are red and those who are close to ink are dark. A person like Mr. Ji, who is truly virtuous and willing to go out of his way for his friends, has already stayed away from him because he dislikes him before he becomes a friend. Those fair-weather friends who are willing to help Mr. Ji wipe his ass probably have other agendas. But the old Marquis is still here, so Ji Chang's doesn't need to worry about these things for the time being. After recovering from his illness for another 2 days, he felt almost better, so he asked Tim Mo to pack his things and plan to go to school. After hearing this, MRSG came to see him specially and told him that he was not in a hurry and had to recover from his illness first. After Ji Chang's punched in front of her, she said nothing. Then he asked who he learned this boxing from. There was a martial arts master in the academy before. He taught his son self-defense before returning to his hometown. I thought he was good, so I practiced a few times in the academy. The academy often recruits some martial arts masters to teach students how to defend themselves. However, most of the martial arts masters only do part-time jobs, so they can be replaced quickly. Ji Chang's statement did not arouse MRSG's suspicion. She just wondered, why haven't I seen you beaten before? After I finished speaking, I thought to myself that the yard where Brother Ju lived was still too small. It used to be okay when he was young, but now that the child has grown up and has to study and practice martial arts, he can't do anything in such a small yard. It would be better to get a bigger yard. Just as he was thinking about it, he heard Ji Chang say, I was beaten once when I came back from the academy, and I happened to meet my father. The father scolded his son for not doing his job properly, so he didn't dare to practice at home. It's this guy again. MRSG's inner dissatisfaction with Master Ji added another layer. Her face was still gentle, she comforted the child and said, don't worry about your father, your grandfather has been on the battlefield, and he also likes these swords and guns. If your father tells you, I will go to your grandfather. If you like it in the future, you can practice more at home. Ji Chang's showed an expression of joy on his face and nodded repeatedly, thank you, mother. Seeing him like this, MRSG felt even more bitter in her heart. What kind of family was she in charge of? The children she raised under her knees were forced to hide their clumsiness. Wen had to pretend not to know how to do it, and Wu had to hide in the academy to practice. Not only did that deserted man harm one of her children, but he also wanted to harm her other child. She was heartbroken in the past, and after getting the housekeeper rights, she just lived her own life wholeheartedly, but now, that guy has intervened in Nagasawa. It would be fine if he was to teach this child well as a father, but he was not. He had accomplished nothing, and he was jealous of Nagasawa's talent. He is as cold-hearted and heartless as ever. But what is she going to do? She is just the other party's wife. To put it bluntly, the male master of this house is still Mr. G. Just as he was thinking about it, Ji Chang said, Mother, don't worry, my son will study hard and support you when he becomes successful. MRSG was moved and smiled, Mom knows your thoughts, but you should not work too hard to make your health bad. You still have to put your health first in everything. Your father is confused now. When you gain fame in the future, you will be able to speak well at home. After all, he won't dare to treat you like he did before. The young man who was raised by her single-handedly had determination written all over his face. He said, my son's efforts to study and gain fame are not to impress his father. My son is to stand by his mother's side in the future and make his mother do whatever she wants. Do what? When my eldest brother and my son grow up, my mother will no longer have any scruples and will tolerate her father in every possible way. Then, my eldest brother and I will be my mother's backing. MRSG was stunned and looked at the child in front of her with a blank face. She was so agitated that she didn't know what to say. Yes. She also has a son. So what if Master G wants to inherit the title in the future? The wealth in this house can be used up without waiting for the other party to enjoy it for a long time, and Mr. G himself has no ability. This is because the old Marquis can still help. In the future, when the old Marquis is gone, he will be just a paper tiger. And underneath her, there are two children with outstanding talents and talents. These two children, whether Changjun or Changs, are definitely on her side. Now the old Marquis does not have to be afraid of Master G, and the two children will not have to be afraid of Master G in the future. In this case, why should she be timid? Even if they really broke up with each other, it would not be impossible for her to go out with Li and bring her dowry with her. At that time, the two children had already grown up, so even if they really reconciled with Li, she didn't have to worry about them being bullied. The more MRSG thought about it, the brighter her eyes became. In the past, for the sake of her children, she could only endure and continue to be this disgusting mistress, helping Master G with housework, being filial to her elders, and taking care of her sons and daughters. But Mr. G went out to have fun every day, threw everything to her, and vented his anger on her two children. She didn't even need to confirm that Master G was dead. When he was young, he had the help of the old Marquis to take care of everything. Now, he has himself in charge of the whole house. Waiting for the old Marquis to leave, and she to leave too, Master G will be able to play with himself to death. Opening the door to the new world, MRSG instantly felt that the breath that had been blocked in her heart dissipated. She even wanted to laugh 3 times. When that guy came back to marry her, he talked sweetly and swore to God that he would treat her well. He deceived her trust and then revealed his true colors. The child Chang Yan was harmed by Master G. He personally brought back a snake and scorpion, and after the other party's affair, he ignored the fact that his own son was critically ill and tried to save the woman's life. Over the years, he had never been kind to her, and he would get angry for no apparent reason from time to time towards the two children under her lap. Why? She didn't marry him, Gao. With her family background, appearance, and good reputation outside, it was too easy to marry a wishful man. It was Mr. G who said he wanted to marry her, and eagerly married her into the house. In the end, he looked aggrieved. She had had enough of so many years of grievance. MRSG suddenly had an impulse. She asked Ji Changs, what do you think if your mother reconciles with your father? The little boy's face almost immediately showed joy. Really, mother? Do you want to make peace with your father? It should have been like this a long time ago. Mom, don't worry about me. When I get married, I will move out of the marquee mansion and take you here to honor me. MRSG breathed a sigh of relief. She thought about various answers from Nagaze, but she never expected that Nagaze's answer would be like this. He didn't mean to blame her at all, nor did he feel that it was irresponsible for him to leave the home mansion. He was only happy and blessing her. MRSG smiled slowly, her face full of relief, and reached out to touch Ji Chang's head. We can't reconcile now, we have to wait a little longer. Wait until her Changjun Changs has a firm foothold in this house, wait until they stand out on their own and no longer need to look at the face of Master Ji as their father, wait until they decide to marry. By then, she would be able to escape from this prison that had trapped her for half her life. MRSG didn't express her plans for the future. She calmed down and talked about the engagement with Ji Changs. You nodded before, and I immediately decided on this matter. I'm easy to talk to, and I don't blame you for these bastard things you did. Nagasawa, don't learn what your father did before. What he did was wrong. If you imitated him, your mother would be disappointed. As soon as she said this, the face of the child who grew up next to her showed worry and nervousness, and he hurriedly promised, Mom, I was wrong. I will never do that again. Don't be angry. What will my mother say in the future, whatever the son does? This child is so well behaved, he must have been influenced by his biological father before. MRSG felt a little more comfort in her heart. Okay, mother knows. That girl is also a good person. She was dragged down by you. You also said you like her before. Since we are engaged, you must be good to others in the future some. Ji Changs nodded and asked, when will we get married? I thought, I have to be admitted to the top of the imperial examination and marry her in a glorious way so that I can live with her. After hearing these childish words, MRSG almost didn't laugh out loud. You kid, why do you think of some fantastic things? You are just a child now. Do you know how difficult it is to get the first prize? Your father invited famous teachers to teach you and took the exam many times, but you still didn't even get the first prize. If you wait, if I marry you after you pass the exam, the girl might think that you are not sincere in marrying me. Ji Chang's face was full of confusion. Didn't the mother want her son to be nice to her? Their family is a scholar, so they naturally like their son-in-law to be the #1 scholar. Aren't they happy if I get the #1 scholar? That must be a pleasure. Not to mention the son-in-law of the top scholar, the son of the top scholar, or the nephew of the top scholar. Everyone will be happy if their relative is admitted to the top prize. But the problem is, how can it be possible for the #1 scholar to pass the exam just because he or she has passed the exam? But seeing that Ji Changs was in high spirits, she didn't interrupt the child's dream of becoming the top scholar. It is a good thing for children to have goals. As for whether the goals can be achieved, anyway, if the #1 scholar is not good, it would be good to be a scholar. You are still young now, and the wedding date is set for 4 years later. She is 1 year older than you. Although it is a little late to get married at that time, it is not too big. Her family is willing to keep her at home for a few more years. If it weren't for this matter, their family would definitely not be willing to marry their daughter to our prince's mansion. Nagasawa, since you agreed to this marriage, you should study hard in the past 4 years and don't let this girl feel that you are not worthy of trust, do you know that? Ji Changs nodded, don't worry, mother, your son will definitely become a completely different person from his father. MRSG smiled and scolded him, don't say this again. It's okay to curse in your heart, but why do you say it out loud? If outsiders heard this, Ji Chang's already bad reputation would probably be charged with unfilial piety. When she went to propose marriage, MRS Ma's smile was a bit forced, but MRSG noticed it but didn't say anything. Comparatively, if she had a daughter, she would be pampered until she grew up, only to be molested by a prostitute just once she went out on the street. In the end, in order to save his daughter's life, he had to let his daughter enter into a marriage contract with this deceitful man. If it were her, she wouldn't be able to laugh. Although the Ma family has an average family background, it is also a scholarly family. There is not even a man in the family who can take a concubine. How can such a family safely marry their daughter to the prince's mansion? Not to mention Nagasawa's own reputation, the carefree Mr. G alone has hindered him a lot. MRSG was in the clear mind, but she could only pretend to have a normal face, mentioned all aspects with a good attitude, and decided on the marriage. Now we can only hope that Nagasawa will not become like his father, be willing to study hard, and treat his wife with care. After MRSG returned, she went to her eldest son's yard again. Ji Chang's delicacy always smells like medicine because of his long-term illness. His face is pale and he speaks softly. He is famous for his good temper. The servants in the Marquis mansion all like him and want to serve him in his room. There are also many girls who like him. He is good-looking and has a gentle temper. Most likely, he will inherit the title in the future. The eldest young master, but Ji Changjun didn't take any of them. For such an old man, he didn't even have a common roommate around him. When MRSG went there, he was sitting on the bed, leaning slightly, playing chess with himself. Seeing that the child could only stay in bed in such weather, MRSG was heartbroken and scolded Master G in her heart. Chang Yan, it's sunny outside, why don't you have someone help you out to bask in the sun? Listening to his mother's words, Ji Changjun looked pale, smiled and shook his head, no need, you can see the sun in the house. Mom, did you just come back from Nagasawa's courtyard? Did you tell him about the marriage? Is this kid making trouble? Since I trained him last time, he has become well behaved and promised me that he would treat the Ma girl well. When I went there today, he even showed me a set of self-defense techniques. It looked pretty good. This kid has really grown up. After hearing his mother sigh, a trace of surprise flashed in Ji Changjian's eyes. Chang's is actually obedient. Didn't he cry and shout that he didn't want to marry a girl from the Ma family? MRSG smiled and shook her head, it was just a child's temper. Later, when he saw that I was really angry, he was afraid that I would ignore him, so he agreed very happily. Ji Changjun was really surprised. The temperament of his ninth younger brother, to put it nicely, is that he is spoiled and overbearing, to put it worst, he wants everything. At first he thought this matter was a bit noisy, but he didn't expect Nagasawa to nod so quickly. This kid seems to have really grown up. I thought that his impetuous temperament would have to wait at least 2 or 3 years to settle down. If things don't go as planned, and if nothing big happens, he may not be able to settle down in 2 or 3 years, can't decide. I really didn't expect that he actually agreed so directly. Mother, did nothing really happen to him? Otherwise, with Nagasawa's temperament, it would have taken 2 or 3 months, right? A trace of discomfort flashed across MRSG's face, but she did not tell the truth. She only said, what can happen? When he grows up, he will know that he loves me as his mother. Don't read or play chess every day. Didn't the doctor tell you to do it? Do you want to rest more? Ji Chanjun saw that MRSG was hiding something, so he didn't tell her. He just agreed with a gentle smile. The mother and son said a few more words before MRSG got up and left. Ji Chanjun sat quietly in the room for a while, then suddenly said, "Inkstone." A tall and sturdy young man pushed the door open and said respectfully, "Brother, what are your orders? Did something happen in the house these days? Especially Nagasawa?" There was a trace of hesitation on Yantai's face. Ji Chanjun frowned slightly, "Even you want to hide it from me?" Yantai quickly lowered his head. This matter was ordered by the madam. She said that the eldest brother was recovering from illness. I know you like to think too much, so I don't want you to worry about it, which is not good for your health. What he said was reasonable, but Ji Chanjun did not change his mind. He just said slowly, "Mother wants me not to worry about it, but if you don't tell me, then I will definitely have to keep guessing. This is called worrying mind. Okay, why don't you hurry up and say it?" The Inkstone hesitated for a moment, but finally said, "Last time, after I left the eldest brother's yard, I went to the ninth brother's yard. I heard that he was beaten for a long time. The ninth brother cried very miserably. My wife and the old man were both alarmed. After that, the servants were all sent down. No one knew what Madame and the others said in the yard, but the old Marquis seemed to be really angry. His sword was drawn and he wanted to chase me to chop him. Fortunately, he ran fast. After that, the old Marquis deducted my monthly payment for 5 months. Ji Chanjun listened quietly, tapping slowly on the chessboard with his fingers that were a little pale due to anemia. Where's Nagasawa? How did he react after this incident? Brother Ninth didn't have any reaction, but he seemed to have suddenly calmed down. He reads books every day, and sometimes practices boxing. He doesn't look like Brother Ninth anymore. Madam is very happy. She said that Brother Ninth will point out the problem in the future. Maybe it will be on the list. Brother Ninth said he was going to the academy today. He rushed to go before his injury was completely healed. This shows that he is really working hard. Ji Chanjun frowned upon hearing this. When Nagasawa was a child, he was lucky. He studied hard, was diligent, and had some talent. He was always praised by his husband. But since he got older, his heart gradually stopped studying. Ji Chanjun said that he several times, but every time the younger brother was in his mouth, what would happen later? As time passed, Ji Chanjun also realized that Brother Ju was perfunctory with him, so he never said anything again. A child of this age has never experienced any wind and rain in the past, and has always been firmly protected in her mother's arms. If there hadn't been any major changes, how could he have suddenly given up? Ji Chanjun deduced it over and over again in his mind, but he couldn't find a suitable answer no matter how he deduced it. He suddenly thought of something and asked the Inkstone, "Besides deducting my father's monthly payment, what else did my grandfather do?" Yantai thought about it seriously. It seems that there is nothing else but that the master is not allowed to enter the front yard. The people who lived in the front yard were my grandfather, him, and his brothers. My mother and sisters lived in the backyard with my father's concubines. My grandfather had long known what kind of temper his father was like, and the reason why he was not allowed to come to the front yard was not just because he didn't want to see his father. Is that to separate the father from these sons? According to the grandfather's temperament, his father must have influenced the next generation by doing this, so he stopped the loss in time. The mark between Ji Chanjian's brows became even heavier. Nagasawa. He was smart when he was young, but as he grew up, he became less and less interested in studying. After his grandfather reprimanded his father and separated him, he suddenly started to study hard again. In addition, the mother's expression was complicated. It's hard for Ji Changjun not to think about Nagay's sudden refusal to work hard and have a relationship with his father. It is even possible that his father personally ordered Nagasawa not to study hard anymore. As for the reason, a rotten person like my father can't do anything. Ji Changjun was really not in good health. After thinking about it for a while, he began to feel drowsy. Before going to sleep, he forced himself to sit still and asked Yantai to go to his warehouse to get a set of the 4 treasures of the study for Ji Chang's. Let him study hard. If there is anything he doesn't know, just come and ask me. I have some friendship with the dean of Kishan Academy. Tell him that if he really wants to learn, I will send him to Kishan Academy. Kishan Academy is the most famous academy today and is notoriously difficult to get into. But as long as you get in, no matter how bad you are, you won't be far behind. It has produced top picks more than 3 times, top picks twice, and second place 7 times. It is a holy place for reading in the eyes of many parents. As a bedridden patient, Ji Changjian's only way to make friends was through writing. He usually found some pigeons, tied his letters to them and let them fly freely. If it falls into the hands of someone who is illiterate, it is possible that the pigeon will turn into a pot of soup. If it falls into the hands of someone with some skills, it is very possible to have a flying pigeon letter with Ji Changjun. In the past, he was just bored and wanted to find something to do. Gradually, as Ji Changjian's health became worse and worse, the purpose of doing this was to make friends all over the world and pave the way for his mother. As long as he has many friends, even if one day he leaves his mother and takes the first step, these friends will take care of his mother as much as possible for his sake. In the past, Ji Changjun did not think that the 9th younger brother who was raised by his mother was worthy of use. This kid was fine when he was young, but his temper became more and more impetuous as he grew up. Although Ji Changjun didn't have much contact with him, he didn't think highly of him. But now it seems that if Ji Chang suddenly stopped working hard and suddenly became angry because of his father's interference, then his connections can be handed over to the other party. At least he believed that his brother, who was willing to admit his mistakes for the sake of his mother, must have the same goal in protecting his mother. Ji Chang's, who was getting ready to go to college, received the 4 treasures of the study from Ji Changjun. This set is all made of redwood. Chimu is not very expensive, it can only be said to be ordinary. As the eldest brother, Ji Changjun would not give something as simple as giving something to his younger brother, unless he has other deep intentions. Ji Chang slowly touched the set of redwood inkstones and smiled. Those who are close to vermilion are red, those who are close to ink are black. It seems he is not alone anymore. Behi free and fastest update, no anti-theft, no anti-theft. Everyone knows I'm a good man. Author, Tang Zhongmao. Chapter 308. The classmates in the college noticed that Ji Chang's had changed. He listened carefully in class and was not as gloomy as before. He seemed to be more relaxed. Sometimes when they meet at the door when they go home, Master Jiju, who used to look gloomy and look down on them, will take the initiative to say hello to them with a smile. This academy is considered a place where the children of the rich and powerful in the capital go to school. MRSG also spent a lot of effort to send her youngest son in. The original owner was not very popular in the college. His classmates didn't like him very much. The reason was that they felt that the original owner always looked down on them. Everyone was about the same age and most of them had lively personalities. If they met outside, they will greet each other cheerfully. What about the original owner? When people greet him, he treats them as if they are nothing, and even a 3-year-old child can see the perfunctory look. As a result, the classmates gradually became unwilling to play with the original owner, feeling that he was too high-minded and looked down upon them. In the past few days, Ji Chang's had been uncharacteristically uncharacteristic, and even appeared to be in a good mood, and they were both at a loss and wondering if there was some conspiracy. Hasn't he always looked down upon them? Why are you so enthusiastic all of a sudden? It's like they know each other very well. Ji Chang's had been interested in the orphaned book in the hands of a gentleman for several days. After pestering him for several days, the gentleman reluctantly lent it to him. He was holding the book and wanted to go back to read it in the wind. He saw it on the way. The two teenagers, who were whispering together, freed up a hand and waved to them with a smile. Zizi, Rowling, haven't you gone home yet? The two classmates who were called by their names accurately and still greeted them so enthusiastically. People greeted people with smiles, but they were too embarrassed to treat each other coldly like usual, so they could only squeeze out a dry smile and said, "Yes, you want to go back too? Yes, it's such a coincidence. Why don't we go together? I remember that the three of us got along quite well." When Ji Chang's heard this, his eyes lit up, and he walked over and naturally put his hand on the shoulder of one of his classmates. "Classmate, we didn't agree. Why do you act like we will definitely agree without asking? We are not familiar with each other." As if he didn't notice the frozen expressions on their faces, Ji Chang's took 2 steps and didn't see them following him. He turned around in confusion and said, "What's wrong? Let's go." 2 people. They looked at each other, but they still couldn't help but drag their feet and followed reluctantly. From time to time, they would hear the familiar guy in front of them say, "You're really walking slowly, it seems I didn't study well in my martial arts class." "No, please understand, we are walking slowly because we don't want to walk with you, okay?" But fortunately, everyone went home in a sedan, and they could disperse when they arrived at the entrance of the college. Then, when they arrived at the gate of the college, they fell into silence when they faced Ji Chang's, who had no carriage to pick him up. Ji Chang still smiled cheerfully, "What are you doing standing around? Let's go. Wang Zizi, where is your carriage?" As soon as he finished speaking, the smile on the smiling young man's face suddenly dimmed a bit, and his eyes also showed a little sadness. Ji Chang's lowered his head slightly and whispered, "My father punished me by not allowing me to take the mansion's car. I was only allowed to walk to the academy." Of course, the truth is slightly different from what he said. Mr. Ji was ordered by the old Marquis not to use anything in the house, including the carriage. So every time Mr. Ji went out to play, he had to go by himself in pain. He found the right time and took the carriage out when Master Ji was leaving, with a deliberately smug and mocking expression on his face. As expected, the other party forced him to get out of the car with an angry look on his face, and scolded the servants at the gate of the home mansion for a long time. Then, Ji Chang's obeyed his father's orders and stopped riding a carriage to school. The two of them looked surprised. "Let's go? The Marquis mansion is not close to the academy. For young men who have been picked up and dropped off by cars since childhood, having to walk back to and from school is simply a fantasy." Ji Chang still looked sad, but soon his face showed happiness. "But it's worth it?" "Worth? What's worth it?" "Ji Chang's, although I have to walk to school, in the future, I can study with peace of mind, which is good. It does sound worthwhile. But here's the thing. Can't you study with peace of mind while riding a carriage?" When they were confused, they saw Ji Chang smiling brightly and patting both of them on the shoulders. The smile on his face was as dazzling as the sun, with happiness written all over his face, "And I can interact with you now. It's just a short walk, not worth anything." After saying that, he waved his hand, "Then you can go back in the carriage. I'll just walk back by myself. See you tomorrow." After saying that, he turned and left. There were only 2 classmates left who were becoming more and more confused as they listened, staring blankly at Ji Chang's back full of joy. "Rowling, do you understand what he said?" Zhou Railing shook his head in confusion. "What about you?" Wang Zizi also shook his head. "I understand every word of what he said, how come I don't understand when they are put together?" What does it mean to be able to travel with them without taking a carriage? Doesn't this mean that you can't communicate with them by carriage? They are all descendants of powerful people. Is it possible that someone can threaten the grandson of the Marquis? The two of them couldn't figure it out. But one thing is certain. Could it be that Ji Chang's didn't interact with us before because someone didn't let him? Wang Zizi was stunned for a while. Isn't that why he looks down on us? Zhou Railing raised a sole question, why does he look down on us? Although he is from the Ho mansion, he is just a concubine, and we are the legitimate sons. I heard that there are more than 10 concubines in the Ho mansion, so we should be better than him. In the past, classmates were unhappy that Ji Chang's was so unwilling to get close to them even though he was just a bastard. It would be fine if this was really some kind of prince or noble. But the Ho mansion is no longer what it used to be. Ji Chang's is just a concubine, he himself is not very strong, and his mother's family is not an official family. Why does he look down on them? The resentment I once felt has now become evidence. Yes, he had no reason to look down on us before. We are much better than him. So, Ji Chang's had never interacted with them before. Could it be that someone really forced him? But even if he is a bastard, he is still a bastard of the Ho mansion. Who can force him? When the two of them followed the clues given by Ji Chang's was walking back with the book. The original owner really looked down upon his classmates in school. The reason he looked down on his classmates was not because he was so good, but because he wanted to be classmates with better people. The powerful are also divided into different levels. Those who are truly capable and well-connected are all in the Imperial College. For example, Ji Chanjun, as the eldest grandson of the Ho family, was admitted to the Imperial Academy at that time. He was a gentleman and made many friends. Although those friends had not yet entered the court, their families were either rich or noble. The original owner was very covetous of his eldest brother's connections, and he looked forward to the stars and the moon and wanted to imitate him. As a result, there was only one quota for the Imperial College per family. If his eldest brother left, he would not be able to go. If the old Marquis or Mr. G thought of ways to open up the door, it would not be impossible to find a way to send him in, but Mr. G has a lot of bastards, and even if he is raised by MRSG, he is not worth such a large proportion to the two of them. Go to the trouble of paving the way for him. As a result, the original owner felt a lot more unwilling to accept it. He didn't want to associate with these unpopular classmates, and felt that they didn't count as well connected. After all, no matter where he was, the only ones who could speak were the eldest sons, and these students who were sent to the academy were not the legitimate eldest sons. Otherwise, there would be no place for him in the Imperial College. As time passed, he became the most disliked person in the Imperial College. Everyone is a noble young master at home, who is willing to have a hot face but a cold butt. After recalling the confused expressions on Wang Zizi's and Wang Zizi's faces just now, Ji Chang's estimated that within 3 days, the fact that he had hidden agenda for not communicating with his classmates would spread throughout the college. After all, these two are famous gossip kings in the academy. Sure enough, when Ji Chang's came to the academy the next day, many students looked at him overtly and covertly, and some came over to say hello to him. After receiving his enthusiastic response, his face first showed a look of seeing a ghost, and then, he looked like, so what they said is true. Throughout the morning, at least a dozen students came to greet Ji Chang's. Ji Chang's communicated with them very intimately, as if his previous depressive and unsociable appearance was their delusion. Even the most outrageous thing is that after the test, Ji Chang's was directly at the top of the list. You must know that he was barely in the middle class before. These classmates were all shameless. No one directly said that they suspected Ji Chang's of cheating. Instead, they approached him tentatively and asked about the content of the test. As a result, Ji Chang's answered fluently and even caught the other party talking about classics and meanings for a long time. The poor student felt dizzy when he came back. He took a long time to calm down before saying, "He is definitely not cheating. What he just told me is much more difficult than the previous exams. That's strange. Isn't he always bad at studying? It doesn't matter. Didn't he reach the top of the list before?" He suddenly fell down. The main thing is to understand why he has changed so much. He smiled at me before, and I almost thought I hadn't woken up yet. What's going on? I heard that he was threatened and refused to join us, so he avoided us before. Who is so arrogant under the emperor's feet that he dares to control even the students of our academy? Wang Zizi squeezed into the middle of the discussion students and looked around to see that no one was paying attention to them. In fact, they were all secretly eavesdropping. She lowered her voice and said to them with an attitude of "I have a big gossip. I found out from my third aunt's mother-in-law's nephew's father-in-law and grandson that every time Ji Chang's did well in the exam, his father would find excuses to reprimand him. If things go on like this, Ji Chang's will slowly get worse." As soon as these words came out, the whole place was in an uproar. The teenagers who were pretending to eavesdrop stopped pretending and crowded forward one after another. Really or not? Why did his father do this? If Ji Chang's becomes successful, it will be a blessing on his face. Maybe it's for the legitimate son? If the bastard is better than the legitimate son, it doesn't make sense. Wang Zizi looked like you are all too outdated. It's not for the legitimate son. I heard that the eldest grandson of the Ho family is like this, and he is often reprimanded. Zizi, where did you get this information? Is it unreliable? Why does this sound so mysterious to me? Wang Zizi curled his lips. You still don't believe me? That was revealed by the servants serving in the inner courtyard of the Ho mansion. If I hadn't been well connected, these crooks wouldn't have been able to find out. And Ji Chang said before that his father wouldn't let him ride in the car. If he really cared about his son, why wouldn't he be allowed to ride in the weather like this? Everyone looked in a daze. When he went back, he looked at Ji Chang's who was reading a book seriously, and was surprised and confused. Could it be that they really misunderstood Ji Chang's? Isn't it that Ji Chang's is arrogant and has poor knowledge, but is he forced to do this out of filial piety? But, why? Ji Chang's listened quietly, pretending not to feel that the people around him were peeking at him, and worked diligently to be a good student and copy notes. When they went back, the students who did well in the exam took their test scores and planned to go back to claim credit, while the students who did not do well in the exam secretly hid and tried to pretend that the incident never happened. Zhou Railing was burying his head in hiding when Huan suddenly noticed from the corner of his eye that Ji Chang's was also hiding. He is at the top of the list. Ji Chang's, why don't you take these back and show them to your family? After saying that, I saw the expression on the face of the young boy next to me flustered for a moment, and he smiled awkwardly. No need, I'll take it back. It feels like showing off. How could be? Who doesn't know that the eldest brother of Ji Chang's family was famous as a talented person when he was in the Imperial College? Among the concubine brothers, all of them had very good grades after entering school. How could it be considered as showing off? Zhou Railing asked his question. The smile on Ji Chang's face became more and more forced, and he lowered his head as if he was disappointed, and whispered, "My father was not very knowledgeable when he entered school. If he saw it, he would feel uncomfortable." Zhou Railing. Ji Chang's looked around and begged Zhou Railing in a low voice, "Don't tell anyone else about this. My father wants to lose face." Zhou Railing. He forced his voice out of his throat with difficulty, "So before, your father also didn't let you associate with us?" Ji Chang sighed. "When my father entered school, his relationship with his classmates was not very good. My grandfather found out about this a while ago, so I can breathe a sigh of relief, but I still can't keep it too high profile." Zhou Railing. No wonder. No wonder. When the father disciplines the son, can the son still refute it? Everything that was unreasonable became reasonable with such a father. Ji Chang saw the expression on Zhou Railing's face changing and whispered, "Anyway, you must not tell others. After all, that is my father, and I can't say anything about him." Zhou Railing immediately raised his head and looked at Ji Chang's with a look filled with sympathy and hesitation. He patted the poor classmate on the shoulder who was actually envied by his biological father, with sympathy written all over his face. "Don't worry, I promise to keep it secret. This is a secret between the two of us." Seeing Ji Chang smile gratefully at him, he sympathized with this classmate even more. Why didn't I realize that Ji Chang's was so pitiful before? "Brother, if anything happens in the future, you can tell me." Ji Chang's nodded and warned again, "You must never tell others, I don't want them to sympathize with me." "Don't worry," Zhou Railing patted his mouth, "I will never tell others the little secret between us." Ji Chang's, who carefully selected a loud mouth, left humming a song in a good mood. At this moment, Zhou Railing really wanted to keep the secret for this poor classmate. But after holding in the incense for about a while, he couldn't help it anymore. "Zizi, let me tell you something, but you must never tell anyone else." Zhou Railing smacked his lips. Zizi's surname is Wang, and he doesn't have any other surname or name. This isn't considered a breach of contract, right? Behi free and fastest update, no anti-theft, no anti-theft. You are listening to novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Everyone knows I'm a good man. Author, Tang Zhonmao. Chapter 309. After Ji Chang's learned that his sickly eldest brother was a ruthless character, he decisively gave up on his originally planned route of passing the imperial examination, getting promoted, getting a salary, and reaching the pinnacle of life. Since there is an easier and simpler way to be lazy, why should he have to work hard on himself? After spreading the rumors, Ji Chang's bought a bunch of medical books on his way back. After he went back and read them all by himself in his room, he stuffed them all under the bed. Before lying comfortably on the bed and falling asleep, he also thought about Mr. G. According to Zhou Railing's combat power, it would take no more than 3 days for this matter to spread throughout the capital. Really looking forward to it. I don't know why, but Mr. G has always felt that his colleagues in the imperial court have looked at him strangely recently. Today at the end of the court, a colleague who was relatively familiar with me even came over and whispered with a complicated expression, "The annual exam is coming soon. If you want to do well in the exam, I have a lot of books you can borrow you." Mr. G, who has always had low scores and passed the exam, said, "No need, I'm not interested in ranking in the annual exam." His colleagues looked at him with a somewhat complicated look. "That's the case, then that's it?" After saying that, his colleagues turned and left. I don't know if it was Mr. G's misunderstanding, but he always felt that the other party looked down on him. How is it possible? He is the legitimate son of the Marquis and will inherit the title in the future. Whether he does well or not in the annual examination will not hinder him. Mr. G quickly put his colleague's abnormality behind him and thought about who he wanted to go to the flower house to play with this time. The old man thought he could control him without giving him money. It was a good idea. He had a lot of friends. Even if he didn't pay for it, there would still be a lot of people willing to pay for him. With this idea in mind, Mr. G wandered to the flower house where he often went, where his friends were indeed drinking and having fun. A smile appeared on Mr. G's face. Before he could say hello, his friends saw him and their expressions changed. "Yuan Lu, are you here to drink at Hualu?" Mr. G was a little confused and sat next to them under their stiff gazes. "I'm here to find you. What fun can I have today?" The friend closest to him stood up immediately. I suddenly remembered that I have something to do at home, so I have to leave first. As soon as he said that, the rest of the people stood up and left one after another, as if they were avoiding discipline like a savage beast. Mr. G looked confused. No, wait, don't leave. Everyone is gone, who will pay for him? He quickly locked onto a friend who moved a little slower and only had time to stand up before successfully running out. What's wrong with them? Why do they all look like they don't want to deal with me? The friend looked embarrassed. Didn't you hear the rumors outside? Mr. G. It's normal that he didn't hear it. Who would spread the rumor to the real owner? It is said outside that you are jealous of your own children because you are mediocre. Any of your sons who are promising will be reprimanded. Your eldest son is very talented but weak, but you gave him medicine and made him seriously ill. Chang, your reputation outside is already a bad one. Although we don't care about this, if the family knows that we are interacting with you, there will definitely be trouble. Yuan Lu, don't blame us. You also understand that we came out to play. Let's get together and relax. I'm leaving, don't chase me. Friends are like being chased by dogs. They run as fast as they can. The blood all over Mr. G's body seemed to have solidified, and he stood there stiffly for a long time without coming back to his senses. How can it be? How did they know? He obviously didn't tell anyone. Yes, Master G is indeed jealous of his child. Of course I'm not jealous of Ji Chang's. He was jealous of Ji Chanjun. To be precise, he was even a little afraid of Ji Chanjun. It was not obvious before he was 5 years old. At that time, Ji Chanjun was like a little cub, eating and drinking well, practicing calligraphy and memorizing books. Later, while protecting the concubine who was plotting to murder Ji Chanjun, he had a big quarrel with MRSG. When the quarrel got heated, he slapped the other person on the face. Ji Chanjun was lying on the hospital bed at that time, and he saw everything. From then on, the way Ji Chanjun looked at him changed. It was no longer the admiration of a child for his father, and the innocence of a child was no longer in his eyes. Obviously Ji Chanjun is just a child, but for some reason, Master Ji is a little afraid of him. Later, Ji Chanjun grew up slowly. He was praised for his amazing talent since he was a child. When he arrived at the Imperial College, he became even more famous. Fainting due to illness, I had no choice but to give up. Everyone knows that if he had not been forced to go home to recuperate due to physical reasons, Ji Chanjun would have been able to carve out a niche for himself after entering the court with his connections and talents. At that time, there was already a faint trend in the mansion that Ji Chanjun was the one in charge. After that, he fell ill and stayed in bed all year round. He could no longer have the calm attitude and gentle words that he, a father, could not refuse. Master Ji breathed a sigh of relief. Slowly, when he realized that Ji Chanjun couldn't get better, Mr. Ji lost his fear and gradually started to shake. He even dared to break into Ji Changjian's room and scold him. I have to say that Mr. Ji felt happy in his heart when he saw his eldest son, who had always looked calm in front of him, lying in bed with a pale face, and even the hand holding a pen was weak and trembling. It doesn't matter if you are better than me, it doesn't matter if you are better than me. It's not like this is what happened in the end. But these thoughts have always been the deepest secret in his heart. The father is jealous of his son. If word spreads, how can he have the dignity to be a man? Mr. G has never told anyone. But why? Why are there such rumors all of a sudden? How on earth did they know? Mr. G panicked for a while and felt cold for a while. He almost immediately focused on Ji Chanjun. This son is too smart, it must be him, and he is taking revenge for his own farce. His head became hot, his face became gloomy, and he returned home with his face as heavy as water, and went straight to Ji Changjian's house. It happened that Ji Chang's was also there, playing chess with his elder brother. The servants in the room were working quietly, but when they saw him, their faces immediately showed vigilance, as if they were afraid that he would hit someone. Mr. Ji didn't care about this, and directly ignored Ji Chang's, who was standing aside, and asked his eldest son with a cold face. Ji Changjun, are you responsible for the rumors outside? Ji Changjian's face was pale and his whole body was weak. He looked up and saw his father's furious look. Surprise flashed in his eyes. Then he thought of something and slowly smiled. I originally thought it was people outside talking nonsense, but now that I see my father looking like this, it seems like it's really true. It's a strange thing in the world for a father to be jealous of his own son. Ji Chang's nodded next to him. Yes, yes, father, you are so old, why are you so shameless? Mr. Ji may still have some scruples about his eldest son, but it is different for this bastard who has never paid much attention to him. When he saw the pretended timidity on Ji Chang's face, he immediately recalled that this guy had pretended to be a white lotus to fool his father into beating him. Old and new hatreds welled up in his heart. Mr. Ji pointed at Ji Chang's and scolded, I'm talking to your brother, why did you get in the way? Ji Chang's face immediately showed a hint of fear, and he leaned closer to his eldest brother. Brother. Ji Changjun stretched out his hand that was so pale that the blood vessels were clearly visible, patted his brother comfortingly, raised his eyes and looked at Mr. Ji indifferently. Why should father care about a child? Child. Mr. Ji almost lost his temper and laughed. The hand pointing at Ji Chang's was so angry that he was trembling. What kind of child is he? Just now he mocked his father, didn't you hear? Even though Mr. Ji's face already looked like he wanted to do something, Ji Changjun still looked indifferent. He was just telling the truth. You traitor! Master Ji wanted to take action, but when he raised his hand and saw the cold and indifferent expression on Ji Changjian's face, he was inexplicably cowed again. In his mind, he recalled the time when one of his concubines supported him and pushed his wife, almost causing her to fall down the steps. If the servants around MRSG hadn't been loyal and she had not been in front, it would have been possible for MRSG to fall to her death on such a high step. At that time, although Mr. Ji also felt that his concubine was not worthy of consideration, he was doting on her and MRSG was unharmed, so he wanted to make it a big deal and make it a trivial matter. As a result, Ji Chang's, who was not yet seriously ill, led people directly into the concubine's yard, pinned her down on a bench in the middle of the yard, sat next to her, and watched the servants beat her up. When Mr. Ji got the news and rushed over, the concubine's body had been beaten to a bloody pulp, but Ji Changjun, the Ruyun son known as Guangfeng Jiya by outsiders, was holding a book in one hand and reading, as if he didn't see what was in front of him. A bleak scene. Seeing him coming, Ji Changjun put down the book, held his hand, and regardless of his fear and trembling, forced his palm to press on the concubine's blood-covered back, and said with a smile, Father, look, if the skin and flesh of the beauty you like is removed, the bones exposed will not look very good. That scene became Mr. Ji's nightmare for a long time. It wasn't until Ji Changjun fell down due to illness that he slowly started shaking again. But now, looking at the eldest son with a calm expression in front of him, Mr. Ji felt chills all over his body. It was as if the nightmare had returned. It's impossible, Ji Changjun is going to die. He won't get better again. Although he comforted himself in this way, the fear in Master Ji's heart still remained undiminished. He stiffly put his hand down slowly and made an excuse for himself in a dignified manner. You are weak, I won't argue with you. Ji Changjun laughed, as if laughing at his father's bravery. I know that Nagasawa has a soft temper and a soft person. My father thinks he is easy to handle, but he was raised by his mother's side. My father should also look at his mother's face and stop bullying this child. Mr. Ji had just regained consciousness and was stunned when he heard this. I bullied him? He designed to bully me. Ji Changjun laughed again, obviously not believing it. The fact that my father is jealous of Nagasawa's talent has spread throughout the capital. Now in front of his son, there is no need to pretend anymore. Mr. G. Me? Those rumors are saying that I am jealous of this kid. He looked at Ji Chang's, who was leaning next to his eldest son, in disbelief. Ji Chang seemed to be very frightened. He shrank back and whispered, "Father, my son didn't say it. They guessed it themselves." Mr. G. Mr. G. I didn't, I really didn't. How could I be jealous of such a useless loser like him? Ji Chang's voice was timid. "Father, haven't you accomplished nothing yourself?" Mr. G. He couldn't refute it. However, the one he was jealous of was clearly Ji Chang-jun. Do you care about Ji Chang's shit? Ji Chang's is such a loser, how can others believe him? Mr. G, who felt wronged in his heart, had nowhere to vent his feelings. Looking around, he only saw a room full of people looking at him with a bit of disgust. As a father, he is jealous of his own son, and for this reason he does not allow him to make progress. This is simply the most incredible piece of gossip this year. Mr. G. I'm not jealous of Ji Chang's. You don't really believe this nonsense, do you? He looked at Ji Chang-jun again. Chang-jun, Chang-jun, you believe it too? You believe him? Ji Chang-jun turned around, touched his brother's head, and said gently, "Chang's has a simple temperament and a pure and kind man. His credit is thousands of times better than yours, father. Why can't I trust him?" Ji Chang's also nodded. "Thank you, brother, for your discernment." Mr. G. Ji Chang-jun, okay, what are you doing standing there in a daze? I'm drunk and confused. Please get out of here. The servant waiting next to him received the order and immediately stepped forward to hold Master G down. "Master, be careful where you step." Master G was indeed very careful with his steps, because these servants directly lifted him up, and his feet could only hang in mid-air, unable to move even if he struggled. Waiting for them to go out, Ji Chang's, who deliberately pretended to be angry with Mr. G, immediately lost the timidity on his face and smiled instead. Father must be very angry. Ji Chang-jun paused without changing his expression. Let him be angry. After so many years of investment in his mother, it is only fair that he has to taste it all for himself. He looked at his half-brother, who was smiling brightly because he was so angry with his father, and felt a trace of regret in his heart. If possible, he would even like to protect his mother and his younger brother from the wind and rain as an old tree, protecting their peace for the rest of their lives. Instead of being like now, I can only watch my 13-year-old brother fade away from the wanton arrogance of being pampered, and I have to force myself to grow up like he did back then. The mother only has 2 children. Secretly, Ji Chang-jun still wanted Chang's to grow up carefree and slowly. It can be regarded as comforting his mother, and it can also be regarded as relieving him of any childhood regrets. It's a pity that he doesn't have much time left, so he can only say sorry to this younger brother. Outside the hospital, Mr. G was still shouting stubbornly. The servants hurriedly grabbed him and ran out. "Master, you are drunk. My eldest brother is weak. Please don't make trouble in his room." "Sir, don't you like to go to Aunt Who's place recently? Can you guys take you there? Quick, quick, hurry up and make some hangover soup." Being held down by a group of people, Mr. G was still struggling strongly. Being slandered and jealous of Ji Chang's son, who had no talent or ability, made Master G vomit out a mouthful of blood. Unfortunately, his fists were no match for his 4 legs. After thrashing twice and being held down, Mr. G, who was almost like a salted fish, was still brought to Aunt Who's yard. Aunt Who came out when she heard the commotion and was stunned when she saw this scene. "Master, what's going on?" The servants serving Ji Chang-jun looked serious and had no intention of saving Mr. G's face. Maybe everyone in the capital knew that the master was jealous of brother Ninth, so he punished him for drinking too much. Mr. G, who was lying dead, suddenly cheated when he heard this. The screams of despair and indignation resounded in the home mansion, startling several innocent birds. "I don't have it. I really don't have it," Bahy free and fastest update, "no anti-theft, no anti-theft. Everyone knows I'm a good man." Author, Tang Zhongmao. Chapter 310. Even though Mr. G tried his best to deny it, no one believed that he really didn't have that intention. What kind of character he is, that is well known in the capital. It doesn't matter if he likes women, there are many men who like women in the capital, but like him, there are rooms full of concubines to carry to the house, and each of them is a concubine, and they themselves are not very capable. If it weren't for Ho, the only son in the family may have rotted into the mud long ago. But even if he is the only son of the Ho family, which dignitary in Beijing thinks highly of him? It's just a title. He doesn't live up to it. Sooner or later, he will take over the huge prince's mansion. MRSG's mother-in-law regrets it every time she talks about it. When they got engaged, Master G looked normal and no one noticed him. This is such a virtue. By the time MRSG got married and realized something was wrong, it was already too late. After learning about this, MRSG's natal sister-in-law came to see her. Also coming with her was her sister-in-law's youngest son. After Ji Chang's learned the news, he pulled out a medical book from under the bed, drove his servants out, and stayed in his room with the doors and windows closed for a while. Over there, after letting her nephew go and play with Chang Yan, MRSG took her sister-in-law's hand and sat down. MRSG's surname is Zhou, and her natal family is also a century-old family. When she was a child, her parents loved her and her eldest brother cared for her. After her eldest sister-in-law came in, she also treated her as her own sister. Before she got married, she could be said to have everything going smoothly. Who would have expected that a family would live in such a bad life after the girl they loved got married? The old marquis was still there, but the old lady couldn't come in person, so MRS Jo came to visit her sister-in-law. She has 3 children, all sons, and they are not destined to be daughters. The younger son has been weak and shy since he was a child, and he has some generals in his heart. The child thought the girl was in pain. After sitting down, he asked the younger son to play with his brother Chan Jun. After watching her youngest son leave, she spoke, "Everyone in the mansion has heard about the rumors. Is it true that the rumors are true?" Others believed this after hearing this, but MRS Jo often went in and out of the house and had met Ji Chang several times. She always judged people accurately and did not think that the concubine raised by her sister-in-law was a good person. If he really loved his aunt, how could he spend money like water every month? MRS Guangzhou knew that Ji Chang's asked his sister-in-law for money every month. How could a man of his age have any place to spend money? He could not have fun with his aunt's money. MRS Joe really doesn't like him if he doesn't make progress and still asks for things. But he was just a humble concubine, and MRSG really felt sorry for him. It was hard for MRS Joe to say anything when Ji Chang's didn't do anything. After hearing rumors all over the capital that Mr. G was jealous of Ji Chang's and ordered him not to make progress, and would beat him and scold him if he made progress, MRS Joe vaguely felt that something was wrong. If it was Ji Changjun who was the one being envied in the rumor, she would still believe it. Ji Chang's. What did he have to be jealous of? MRSG didn't know what her sister-in-law was thinking, so she nodded. Nagaze is timid and has never dared to say anything. Even I tried to hide it. If his father hadn't brought a stick to beat him, and the old marquis was here, he is afraid that he will keep hiding it. As she said that, she sighed. A good child was almost delayed. She had a good relationship with her sister-in-law, and she did not shy away from it. She directly told what happened before and after Ji Chang's engagement. I thought that she was also his aunt after all, so I didn't stop the two of them from getting along. Who would have expected that she has been growing up? Ze provoked me. The child lost his biological mother and I was the only one who could rely on him, but I was frightened by Aunt Ru. Speaking of this, MRSG said bitterly, the old lady in the mansion is not a good person. She used to call Nagays over to talk. I thought she was older and looked at these juniors with more kindness. Who would have thought that Nagasawa had just told me quietly a few days ago that every time the old lady called him, she said in secret that I was not his biological mother after all, but my grandmother really cared for him. I really don't know what to think. She doesn't have a child, even if she can win over Nagasawa, what can she do? MRS Joe's natal family was not as clean as the Joe family, but she quickly thought of getting a title. That's not necessarily the case. When you first came in, she tormented you a lot, and gave her natal concubine to your husband as a concubine, for fear of beating you. The idea of seizing the title. Afraid of reminding MRSG of sad things, she didn't go into details. After all, everyone knew that Chang Yan couldn't last long with his appearance. When MRSG just came in, the old lady, as her nominal mother-in-law, did a lot of tossing her. Later, MRSG slowly grew up and the other party couldn't do it again. Keep tossing. I am afraid that the idea at that time was to let the future heir of the home mansion come out of the belly of her natal concubine. It's a pity that she gave away a total of 5 concubines, but none of them could get pregnant. Chang Yan looked bad, and it was reasonable for her to target Ji Chang's, who was treated as one of her own by MRSG, and who was probably pushed to be the heir after Chang Yan left. Although she was not optimistic about Ji Chang's in her heart, MRS Joe was still relieved to know that he took the initiative to inform MRSG that the old lady was trying to win over him. Don't be too kind. Nagasawa's mother is indeed a good person, but people are different. I think that Auntie Ru is restless. She can obviously be a decent lady, but she wants to catch up. I want to be a concubine and instigate a relationship between you and Nagasawa. I'll deal with it as soon as possible before anything happens. Don't worry, sister-in-law. In the past, I only looked after Nagasawa for the sake of her face. Now that I know what kind of person she is, I will naturally not treat her like before. MRSG also knew this truth. The child was her enemy. As her aunt said to Nagasawa behind her back, it made the child feel so insecure. How could she not hate it in her heart? Before, she was just worried that Nagays still had feelings for this aunt, but after asking and finding out that Ji Chang's didn't care much about her, she didn't do anything too extreme. She just revoked the privileges given to her because of her relationship with Ji Chang's. Master Ji's wife was very evil, but his concubine was even more evil. Mr. Ji, when he doted on you, he wanted to go to heaven. When he found a new love, the old love turned into mosquito blood. It was like he had to protect his beloved concubine back then when he tried to murder his legitimate son. Now, you see, he still remembers. I don't remember my concubine's name. Aunt Naru also wanted to drive a wedge between Nagasawa and MRSG, but she didn't know that without MRSG's protection, she was nothing. MRSG didn't need to do anything for her to fall into the abyss. MRS Joe nodded, but she was still a little bit dissatisfied with Ji Chang's in her heart. She always felt that the child was not someone who cared for others, and had learned a lot of bad habits from his own father. Even if someone instigated him, it still made her feel uneasy. After chatting about various gossips in the capital, MRS Joe was thinking about her youngest son and sent someone to ask him if he would come and eat with them. As a result, the girl came back and said that the third brother went to play by himself after seeing Master Chang Yan. Don't worry, madam. Third brother is with someone. I heard he is going to play with ninth brother from the Marquis mansion. MRS Joe immediately became concerned. Her youngest son was frail since he was a child and was raised carefully by his family. He is now 11 years old, but he is still like a child. He also stutters when he talks. Whenever he gets along with outsiders, he is ridiculed openly and secretly. She never trusted him alone. In the past, her younger son also went to look for Ji Chang's. Although Mrs. Zhou had objections to him, she didn't think Ji Chang's would do anything to her son. It wasn't until several times that she found that the jade pendant that the child had been wearing was missing. After asking, she found out that Ji Chang's actually liked it and said he wanted to use it, so he actually gave it to him. Mrs. Zhou immediately cleaned up and discovered that several small but valuable items were missing from her youngest son's room. When asked, they were all given to brother Ninth. Those things were not worth much to a family like theirs, and it was not easy for her to upset her sister-in-law with these things, so she could only swallow her sorrow and told her son not to go to Ji Chang's again in the future. Unexpectedly, this child has such a short memory. She could only laugh dryly. This kid is really ignorant. I heard that Nagasawa is studying hard. How can he disturb others? Pooh. What hard study? I heard that this kid goes to Hualu every day and almost lives there. She suppressed her disdain from the bottom of her heart, and then said, "Go and bring the third brother back quickly, don't make trouble with Nagasawa." MRSG really thought she was afraid that her nephew would disturb Ji Chang's. It doesn't matter. Nagasawa is raised by my side. They are still cousins and they are about the same age. It is normal for them to play together. Mrs. Zhou's smile froze a little more, but she didn't know how to tell her sister-in-law, who was determined to treat Ji Chang's as her biological son, so she could only sit there dryly. She was a little anxious in her heart. If something was missing, it would be secondary. She was worried that her silly boy would be bullied by Ji Chang's. With her younger son's temperament, she was afraid that even if he was bullied, he would only be happy. When Mrs. Zhou was restless, Ji Chang's welcomed his innocent little cousin. "Brother Ninth, I'm here to play with you." The third brother of the Zhou family is nicknamed Beizhui, which shows the family's expectations for him. In the eyes of the original owner, this was a little stammering fool worth mentioning, who was easy to coax and had money. When the original owner was short of money, he would coax the other person, but when he was not short of money, he didn't even bother to talk to him. This is not the prejudice of the original owner. There is indeed something wrong with Zhou Beizhui. Not only is he weak, he has been slow to speak since he was a child. At the age of 5, he can only speak 1 or 2 words, and later it was discovered that he has a stutter. Now he is 11 years old, and he still talks like a child of several years old, speaking in a childish voice. Zhou's family is unwilling to admit it, and they only say that Zhou Beizhui is frail to the outside world, but many people know very well that Zhou Beizhui is now in school, but his classmates all dislike him for being stupid and stammering and don't want to play with him. Children are like this. Even if they are pampered by the whole family at home, they still want to play with their peers. If no one plays with them, they can only play alone. Until he met the original owner who was willing to talk to him, he didn't know that the other person's good attitude was just because he wanted to defraud him of valuables. So he thought of the original owner as a good friend and looked for him eagerly every time he came to the home mansion. As soon as he finished speaking, a young boy who was well dressed and clearly loved by his family came bounding in. His fair face was full of innocence and childishness. "Brother Ninth, do you miss me? 100 years old is here? Come in, come in." As in Beizhui's memory, Brother Ninth, who was always very gentle to him, took his hand and sat down. Beizhui liked being treated so close to him. Although he was like a child, he had a good memory. He still remembered every time Brother Ninth was like this. It's because he gave away something of his own. So he immediately carefully took out a string of Buddhist beads from his arms and handed it over, saying to "Please, Brother Ninth, you see, this is what my mother begged for me." She said, where, Wear this and you can get it. The blessings of Buddha and ancestor must be very valuable, so I'll give them to you. Ji Chang's took the string of beads and put them on Zhou Beijui's own hand. Wen Sheng said, I don't want Buddhist beads, do you have money? Yes, yes, 100 years old and rich. Zhou Beijui was afraid that he would ignore him if he said there was no Nagay's brother, so he quickly stood up and ran out. Lanur, Lanur, quickly bring my money and money bag. Third brother, my wife will be angry if she finds out. No, mothers don't get angry. Just give it to me. Listening to the sounds coming from outside, Ji Chang stood up, leaned against the door and looked at Zhou Beijui, who was arguing with someone in the yard. A little girl standing outside had a face full of reluctance. She had obviously been warned by Mrs. Zhou, but in the end she couldn't resist her master and could only hand over the purse. Zhou Beijui got the money bag and smiled again on his face. He ran back and put the money bag into Ji Chang's hand and smiled at him stupidly. Brother Ninth, I'll give you the money. Ji Chang's reached out and touched this little cousin's head. Good boy, let's go out and play, okay. The girl's face immediately showed panic. Master Ninth, our young master cannot go out. What if he is lost? Don't worry, with me here, how can you lose your 100 years old? The girl is about to cry. It was because the ninth young master of the home mansion was with her that she felt uneasy. Madam had repeatedly warned them to keep an eye on the third brother and not let him have more contact with the ninth brother of the home mansion. Seeing that the two of them were going their own way, she could only grit her teeth and follow them, and by the way, she sent another girl to report to Mrs. Zhou. Mrs. Zhou was having a good time with Mrs. G when she was still in the mansion, but she suddenly received bad news and her whole body was in bad shape. He stood up suddenly and his voice was a bit shrill. What did you say? Third brother was taken out. Mrs. G's expression also changed. She also knew that Zhou Beijui was like a child, and the Zhou family had always protected her tightly. Except for going to the academy and going out with Mrs. Zhou, she usually stayed in the mansion. Sister-in-law, don't worry, I'll send someone to chase them back right away. No, no, I want to go in person. Mrs. Zhou calmed down quickly. After all, her son was still surrounded by people from their mansion. Those people were carefully selected by her and were absolutely loyal. With them here, there shouldn't be a big problem. She didn't miss that Ji Chang's defrauded her son of money again. That boy spent money like water, and he could go to any good place with the money. It would be better for her to take her sister-in-law with her to catch the current situation. You also go with me. As you know about the child, I really feel uneasy. If I don't bring him back in person, I'm afraid I won't be able to do anything. Mrs. G didn't think much and quickly agreed. The people in the Zhou mansion were indeed smart. After Ji Chang's and Zhou Beijui arrived at their destination, they immediately sent someone back to report the news. It's just that when he replied, he was a little hesitant. Master Ninth took third brother to go. Mrs. Zhou was not in a hurry at first, but she became anxious when he saw him like this. You can tell me where I went. At that moment, everyone wanted to hang their heads on the ground, went to the flower house. Mrs. Zhou was stunned for a moment, then her expression changed drastically. How could he take Bai Sui to a dirty place? Mrs. G also looked shocked. Unbelievable that Nagasawa would take her nephew to the flower house. Didn't the child say that he would be a good person and treat his fiancée well in the future? You've only been good for a few days, why are you back to your old ways? The two matrons were shocked by the news. They hurriedly asked people to hitch their cars and hurried all the way to Hualu. Mrs. Zhou couldn't hold it back and started crying in fear. I heard before that Ji Chang's likes to go to the flower house to be unrestrained, but it's not the Zhou family after all, so I can't say anything. I didn't expect him to take Beijui with him. In a place like Hualu, there are all kinds of diseases. If I were to contract it at 100 years old, I wouldn't be able to live anymore. MRSG was also anxious. Sister-in-law, don't be anxious. There is no time to do anything in such a short time. Let's rush there first. What's more, the Hualu doesn't even open its doors these days, right? MRSG still just cried. MRSG was also embarrassed and anxious in her heart. What happened to Nagasawa? Could it be that what I said last time was just to coax her? A group of people hurriedly arrived at the door of the flower house. The door was open, but there was no one inside. There were only a few servants cleaning. When they saw two ladies who looked like they were rich and powerful people barging in, they subconsciously stepped back. Hide. This world has a lot of requirements for unmarried women. After getting married, many rules do not have to be very strict. The flower house has been open for so long, and I have seen many ladies who come to find their husband to arrest their sons. They can be regarded as enemies. Enriched. Are you ladies here to look for someone? We don't open the door during the day. A girl guarding the stairs on the second floor saw it and said quickly, Madam. Young Master Ninth is upstairs. As soon as the boy from Hualu heard that he was here to look for Ji Chang's, he immediately showed an expression of relief on his face. It turns out it belongs to the ninth young master of the Sunji family. Please invite me. The ninth young master is in the room next to the stairs. But he is busy now, why don't you two wait? The faces of the two ladies suddenly turned green and red. He's busy and asked them to wait? Damn it, he really brought his younger brother here to find a girl to play with. It's outrageous. It's outrageous. MRSG finally couldn't restrain her anger, rolled up her large sleeves, and went upstairs in an aggressive manner. She wanted to kick the door with her legs. After all, she still didn't want to see the scene she shouldn't have seen, so she said to the boy beside her, kick the door open for me. The people in Hualu hurriedly said to please, Madam, the door is not locked, you can just push it open, but it is best not to go in now. Master Ninth has told us not to disturb you as much as possible. MRSG was even more angry. Why don't you lock the door when you do something like this? Does this kid have any sense of shame anymore? MRS Joe also stumbled up and asked the servants of the Joe family, where is the third brother? Which room is the third brother in? The girl immediately replied, third brother is also in this room. What? MRS Joe's eyes were almost wide-eyed, and she almost didn't breathe and was sent away on the spot. Also, too. Are you taking a girl with you to play with? When the girl saw MRS Joe acting like this, she quickly explained. Madam, you misunderstood. Third brother and the others are. Boom. The door was pushed open by the furious MRSG. In the room, Joe Beijui was lying on the bed with his back covered with gold needles. Ji Chang's was slowly removing one of the needles. This scene was so terrifying that MRS Joe almost fainted. The reason why he didn't really faint was because when his younger son saw her coming, he happily raised his little face and smiled at her. Mom, are you coming here to play too? It's a lot of fun here, there's a lot of delicious food. MRS Joe looked at her son who was laughing so silly at her, and realized something belatedly. Beijui, you don't stutter anymore. Joe Beijui blinked blankly, as if he realized something was wrong with him. He was stunned for a second and then laughed. It seems so. Brother Ninth said he wanted to cure me, and he really cured me. Brother Ninth is so amazing. Ji Chang's held his breath after collecting the last needle on his back and put it in the needle box. Then he breathed a sigh of relief and looked at the two elders in confusion. Mom, Aunt, why are you here? I rushed over and saw two people pulling out needles. How to say this? It's quite embarrassing. MRSG asked dryly, Nagaze, when did you learn to treat diseases? Ji Chang's gave the Hualu boy a look. The Hualu boy who was waiting carefully on the side had a chance to get in the conversation and hurriedly explained. You two madams don't know yet? Young Master Ninth has been studying medicine. When people in our flower house are sick, they all ask young Master Ninth to cure them. Ji Chang smiled, I am also trying to learn medicine, and I always need someone to practice. The girls in Hualu are willing to let me treat them. After I have learned a little bit, I have been coming to diagnose and treat them frequently these days, so that I can improve my self-own medical skills. I learned how to cure stuttering by accident before, and Bai Sui had money, so I bought a good golden needle and helped Bai Sui get rid of the stuttering disease. The young man from Hualu praised the situation very well. Young Master Ninth, you are so humble. We all appreciate your medical skills. You can even treat people who cannot be cured by the miracle Dr. Dr. Lu. How can you say it is just superficial? MRSG. MRSJ. I came to Hualu to treat illnesses. Take the money bag to buy needles. Why did catching a girl suddenly turn into a treatment scene? Behi free and fastest update, no anti-theft, no anti-theft.